was at Nostrum and Fulton. And I said, how are you gonna, that's a busy intersection, a lot of traffic and commerce, but they actually plugged up the whole street, just like they did Lenox Avenue. They just took barriers, cut the traffic off, and extended it from Nostrum down toward the Bed-Stuy Restoration. And that worked out well because Bed-Stuy Restoration has parking. I was put in the parking lot, and they even paid $5, had my car cleaned. And then the vendors were in the courtyard of Bed-Stuy Restoration. So it was laid out well. And then the quality. You have to give Brother Malik Zulu Shabazz and the folks that were a part with him, New Black, the mic and grab the mic and, you know, beat up the world with the mic and you know, and jeopardize the elders and the children. And he was able to make his statement, then step back and let everything flow, etc. And so I really have to give him credit. The highlight was a little young lady. She wasn't as tall as this podium. She was probably down here. And she spoke in 3 languages. And gave her presentation as strong as you could imagine. And she's just a wonderful, sweet person. And I was looking for her mother and didn't see her mother. It was her father who had brought her there, was in the middle of everything. So that was just wonderful. And of course, Dr. James McIntosh, the co-chair of Simultan, was there. But he brought forth his youngster. So he has this young man who has done a study of hip-hop lyrics and their content and what they're all about. He had presented it and had us in tears a few months back at Bethany Baptist. So Dr. McIntosh thought that this was a good time to have the young man also come out again. And he was good. Plus he helped MC and introduce a couple of other people. So it was good to see the range. Regent Sanford came. You know, she's the top educator in the state, one of the top in the country. And she came to make a very strong statement. And in fact, I showed her my presentation. I said, you went and stole some of my material. I was going to be talking about the stolen legacy, the African stolen legacy, and she had laid it out. So I just followed up on her, and I did get a chance to speak. But I was up there 4 hours before I got 4 or 5 hours in the hot sun. I felt like it's one of these, when you go to Africa and they have these ceremonies, you got to sit there for hours in the sun. And so that, I felt like I was at home in Africa. I looked down at the audience and saw a few people. I saw who I thought was their mother, Keffer, the co-founder of the First Rail Alliance. And I looked up for a while, and then she wasn't there. But she told me this today that she stayed through most of the program, but she had to get out of the heat. After a while, it just got too hot. And then I looked up, and there was another gray head of hair, and that was Mother Franklin. And she stayed for the whole time, never worried about the heat. And she would probably tell you, look, I got used to the heat after my days in South Carolina picking cotton. This is a piece of cake here. And the weather was beautiful. And so that made the activities go up. The hip-hop presentation was quality. Except one young man, Latino, he just couldn't get F-U-C-K out of his, you know, I was hoping he would say F word, but he just said, and then he put the F-M in there. And, you know, that's the only thing I felt was a little bit off, because we were talking about the correct lyrics and the correct imaging, but that's the one that got all people up, excited. And then Queen Afua's son presented, and he presented a strong message that we all should present before he did any of the hip-hop presentation. He said if we don't get our mind, our body, and our spirit detoxed, then you don't need to talk about black power, because we ain't gonna have the energy to exercise it or appreciate it. You know, unless you can work on that body, and then that body affects that mind, and of course the mind and spirit. So that was a good presentation. You know, I always make that even to my students. They wonder, I came in here for black study. What the hell was the professor talking about? I got a toxic mind and a toxic body and a toxic spirit. But was my presentation Wednesday when I opened up my classes. I'm going to continue it on Monday when I go back in the classroom. And then he was with Terry S., and she's one of my students at City College. Both of them did a presentation together. The political leaders were there. Al Van was there. And, you know, his office is on Fulton. So I said, this really is Van Avenue. Sonny Carson and others were fighting to change it to Harriet Tubman. And so I said, now it looks like Harriet Tubman with all these black folk out here and all the activity. And then Charles Barron, of course, he's running for the mayor of New York already. And so he was continuing his campaign and actually presented a petition. What was it? A certification from the city council.
Well, a proclamation.
Proclamation.
Yes.
And it was one of the strongest I've ever heard made, you know, of that nature. It was an outstanding, it was an historic proclamation stating what the struggle's all about and the role of the youth in it and the Million Man March significance, and the Million Youth March significance relating to the Million Man March.
It was a Dr. Buckley incident.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Oh, okay. And then Daughtry, of course, did his thing. He was ever saying. Dr. Ben, when I spoke, I said I bring greetings from Dr. Ben. And I had talked to him earlier, and he always made it his business to go to the Million Man March and sit up there no matter how long the presentation, and no matter what controversy. Dr. Ben was right in the middle of things. And he respected Dr. Khalid for coming in and standing up for what he believes and raising issues. So I mentioned that Dr. Ben sends his greetings, love, and respect to the group. And of course, we need to honor the ancestors. And so one of the most important ones that I felt needed to be raised outside of the tradition of Dr. Well, were two. The younger would be Dr. Amos Wilson. And so I had, I don't go anywhere without Amos. And so I took my special copy, my hardback copy of Blueprint for Black Power. And in order to acknowledge him and the work that he's done. And anybody who doesn't have a copy of Blueprint, the soft cover or the hard, needs to start saving some money and get a copy. You know, you got yours at home? What about your niece and your nephew that need it more than you? Are you working on it? Might be a Kwanzaa present. Kwanzaa present. Okay, all right. And of course, Dr. Amos's work was preceded by the giant, Dr. John Henry Clark. And I went to my library and pulled out Dr. Clark's special volume, African World Revolution, Africans at the Crossroads. And this, Dr. Clark has many works, but this is one of his most outstanding. And it meant a lot for the day, because there's Lumumba, who was killed in the 60s, and Nkrumah, who were removed in the 60s, Malcolm, who was destroyed in the 60s, and, you know, and do it. So I actually wrote something out, which I have never done. You have never seen me, even if I got it, I never used it. But I wanted to make sure I got in some of the things I needed to get in, and so I read some of it. And one of the important things was the question of, and I ended it, I didn't hold this up, but I ended it with South Africa, and how we need to have an analysis of really what South Africa was all about. And before I did, I mentioned that the work that we've done in the 60s, even in the 50s, but highlighting and intensifying in the 60s, that work was furthered much of it was initiated by young people. And even though King and others were involved in the Montgomery bus boycott, and they had heightened civil rights issues, but SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was a basic conservative group. Ministers are conservative. This wasn't a conservative of the conservative, but they were not a radical group. And it was the students that began to push them to be more serious and more real about the struggle. And King would always work with them. Ella Baker was a woman behind the scenes who could work with the ministers, but she could also work with the youth. And so some of the more radical and progressive ministers were able to get in the middle of things and push it along. One of the persons holding the thing at the center was Dr. Wyatt T. Walker. And he was King's commander-in-chief and the general. But then you had others that were more radical, and they were trying to push to have a more progressive posture. But then when the students came, they pushed it beyond the limit. So that's why it was a big drama at the King March with John Lewis and A. Randolph and the rest of them. Violet Rustin was in the middle of it because John Lewis was going to speak for the youth, and they felt it was going to be too powerful, too straightforward in laying out the disbelief that Kennedy was serious about civil rights. And people trying to play politics with Kennedy. And so there was pressure to rewrite the speech. And so he eventually did. Now he's swung around. He's no longer a radical.
There you go.
He's you know, I hate to say it, I don't want to defend anybody unnecessarily, but you know, when I see him, I just think about the pork chop situation. And you know, pork chop preacher and the pork chop leader.
Pork chop congressman.
But in the day, he was being pushed by the young people to make a strong statement. But we need to understand, as we dissect the 60s, that it was young people, young leadership in the 40s and 50s, and Nkrumah when he left the Great Manchester Conference in 1945, and was called back to Ghana by more established Ghanaian leaders. Now, they were revolutionaries in their sense. They were going against colonialism, but Nkrumah was way beyond them. And so when he came back as a young man, they wanted to use his young energy, but that young energy was so well organized and so well projected that he took over the movement. So by the 50s, Nkrumah was a serious radical and established independence, Pan-African independence for Ghana. And then he stretched it out in 58 to Guinea, because Sekou Touré had decided he would break from the French. And again, you get that youth. Sekou Touré is a younger labor leader in the movement. Ufred Bwani was the older type. And Sekou pushed past Ufred Bwani and declared that Guinea wanted independence right now. They didn't want a French Union connection. So France said, if you do, we're going to strip you of everything you got. We're going to take out the toilet paper, take out the telephone books, we're going to take out everything, school records, and we're going to bring you to your knees. And it might have happened if Nkrumah did not have the consciousness to take cocoa money from Ghana that had a reserve of money and give tens of millions of dollars to Guinea to keep their revolutionary thrust going. So in the 60s, you had this Pan-African connection that reached its height, with the groundwork being laid in the 40s and intensifying in the 50s. And the youth were always at the forefront. We had a Black Power movement here. And in fact, Newark was the site of the first Black Power conference. I don't know whether any of you all were there. You were too young. Where were you? In the Caribbean then? 65. Where were you, brother? In Brooklyn? Okay. trying to look for the girls and whatnot.
No, I was even younger than that.
In '67. In other words, the Black Power conference here came right on the heels of the urban explosion.
Yes.
That was predictable. I predicted it from the halls, from the podium at City Hall.
Unfortunately, my parents kept me away from that sort of thing.
Oh, okay. Now, where were you?
I was in Pennsylvania. I was married with children.
Well, that didn't stop you from being a part of the struggle.
No, I kept up with it though.
All right.
I didn't, well,
I mean, in the '60s, black people was burning places everywhere.
I remember the riots in '67 in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's what I call it, urban rebellion. And it was, it spread, it was contagious. Because while we were in the Black Power meetings, they got word that Detroit had gone up. And people were celebrating like it was a victory in the World Series or something. Detroit was going up. People was lugging couches down the street, whatnot. And so, but the cutting edge of the movement, the leadership was not Clayton Powell, but the cutting edge of the movement was the push that was coming from the Black Panthers and us organization and people organizing in the streets and of course Malcolm had been assassinated in '65, and so that left his organization reorganizing itself around the OAAU, Organization of African American Unity, Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and his Pan-African linkage was the potential there. In fact, Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark hooked up with Malcolm at that time in the '60s and tried to be his support and advisor. And you know, when he passed, they continued to work with the direction that he had charted. And so, and I had to admit that the Black Studies movement, which emerges with SNCC, SELC and SNCC in the beginning of the '60s, and the SNCC students becoming radicalized actually almost upset the movement because the financing of what we do has been done by white folks. And a particular group of white folks knows how to finance us and use that financing to control, and minute control, and that's the Jewish community. And so they had successfully financed much of King work. Whenever he needed some serious money, they would hold a party or a dinner at somebody's house, and 100 of them would come, and then he'd have the money. When he wanted to do some smaller work, then he'd organize the churches and chicken fry or whatever we did to raise money. But when people like that give money, they also have heavy strings attached.
That's right.
And so the controls of the movement forward were very real, from organizations that had Jewish connections, from labor unions, from other foundations that were willing to support but also wanted to control. And when the SNCC started moving in its very serious direction, they had an anti-Israeli stance, and that definitely upset the Jews, and a pro-Palestinian stance, and that confirmed that something was wrong. And so there was this dilemma in our community. Eventually, interesting enough, Martin King, after the Birmingham jail and after seeing what's happening with the Vietnam War, he became the most radical of them all. And when he spoke April 4th, 1967, at the Riverside Church, which is the Rockefeller Church, he chose that particular moment to declare, I'm going to give my life in this struggle, and I'm going to say what I need to say. And he said it. And when he said he went up to the mountaintop and he saw the promised land, he meant that he was willing to give his life. Because they had said, either you take your own life, or we're going to disgrace you. You know, that's where J. Edgar Hoover worked.
Yes.
And he said, no, you're going to have to take my life.
Yes.
And in the meantime, I'm going to try to organize the people, and we're going to bring it to you. And so he organized the a movement on Washington. It wasn't a march on Washington, it was a movement on Washington of all of the disconnected and alienated segments of American society, including poor whites from Appalachia, Native American, and he was going to build a city of poverty, poor people's city on the lawn of Washington. And so white folks couldn't handle that, because the last time it was done was in the 30s, when the bonus, the veterans, looking for their bonus came to Washington, white folks.
That's right.
And Douglas MacArthur brought in the tanks and whatnot and moved them out.
Yes.
So King was really threatening America when he did it, and by adding his weight to the Vietnam War, he was really going for the jugular. And so they took him out. Symbolically, they took him out the very day that he made his statement to the world that he was going to give his life. They said, we're going to take it. They took it a year later. And then the black community responded. We didn't tie no ribbons, didn't shed no tears. But too long before we operated, like James Baldwin said, the fire makes time. And over 100 American cities burned. And so you had this, the burnings that took place in 64, 65, 66, and 67, such as in Newark and Detroit, and Watts. But in King's assassination, in the wake of that, they had to put troops on the Capitol of the United States, the steps of the Capitol, to prevent black folk from torching it. And so the response of the youth was real. And then out of that actually came the Black Studies movement. There were tentative processes of putting in Black Studies in 66, 67 out on the West Coast, Laney College and others. But the movement across the nation comes in the wake of King's assassination. And young people say, well, what can we do? We just can't stay on these college campuses and not respond. And so they responded. They started taking over campuses, Cornell, and City College, and California, and whatnot. And as a result, they demanded changes in admissions, demanded changes in how they teach, demanded changes in the teachers, demanded changes in departments. And that's when the whole Black Studies movement moved from not having any college campuses where they had Black Studies to within 3 or 4 years of having 500. And so the youth and their contribution has been enormous, not often understood, but it's connected with the forward thrust of our people. Now, that acknowledgement of the youth in terms of Black Studies leads me into the two areas that I wanted to tie up my presentation for you today, and then also continue in it. At the end of September, for 2 weeks, from the 19th of September through to the 30th, but we'll probably extend it out into the first week of October, we're going to have a series of conferences, a whole conference process taking place at City College. And since many of you don't have sense enough to get on a train, was it 15 minutes, you're in New York alone. The fastest rapid transit system you're gonna get. And then if you take the A train, when you walk out of you go right up to Harlem, and you're right there at City College. But since, I grew up in Jersey. This is where I was born and raised, so I know how Jersey has a particular breed of African. Even if you come from the Caribbean, you jump in the bag. You jump in the bag. We'll do something in that period in New Jersey to highlight our reclaim on African civilization. Our brother Clemson Graham, Clemson is very sensitive to what Africans do. I'm not so sensitive because I have to live with him. I live with him all my life. In New Jersey, we lived next door to him, lived in the same building with him in Newark. And, we used to let them use our washing machine to wash their clothes, and they'd bring us over some spaghetti, or gabagoo, or bafafazoo, or whatever they was quiet. And so the relationship between black folks and white folks was very tight in Europe. But we had to maintain our ground. We often had to fight them, particularly at Barringer High School. So if you want to understand why Baraka is so feisty, I think that has a lot to do with his Barringer experience. And my brother and I went to Barringer at the same time Baraka was there. And in between us were the Payne brothers, Donald and Bill Payne were all there. And so we had to fight these Italians to maintain our African dignity, just to go to school. And so Newark was very interesting. But Clemson said, these white folks are trying to take the claim of early civilization from us based upon the invasion of Iraq. You know, you heard all this thing, Iraq, the cradle of civilization. So Clemson got very offended. He said, we need to have a counter to that. And sometimes you can deal with the negative, but your real strength is on the positive. So I said, instead of dealing with what Iraq isn't, let's highlight what the Nile Valley is. And so for these 3 weeks, we're going to highlight what the Nile Valley is. And that'll shed the proper light on where Iraq fits. And we can make our commentary on that too. But we're going to reclaim the Nile. Now, what significance is this reclaiming of the Nile for African peoples? It's monumental. It's the most revolutionary thing we have ever done to restore ourselves. You saw Gil Noble today, and most of y'all was BSing, so you didn't see Gil today. How many people taped it? Nobody taped it. And I said, you got to tape it? Yeah, you better bring a copy of the tape next week. If you don't bring it, you can't come. Yeah, he's going to continue next week. I don't even know how to tape thing. But that sister is the victory. She's the victory. In other words, it's people like her coming up under us that's going to carry the victory. And doing it with such grace. No bitterness, smiling, beauty, etc. That's the victory. Cracker's going to die just seeing her. Who the hell is that? Does she know Jeffries? Does she know Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben? He's going to continue it. He called me, he was so excited. When he was taping her, he was almost peeing in his pants.
Wasn't she in Barbados?
She had been in Barbados.
Yes.
And that's when James Moore was there. And that's when Gil had seen a copy of that. But she also was in Teaneck at Fairleigh Dickinson 4 or 5 months ago. That's when my wife went and saw her firsthand. And just a wonderful person, serious, handling white folks. The auditorium was full of white folks, etc. It didn't mean nothing to her. She just laid it out as if there wasn't there, messing with their mind, with the truth, etc. And then she's been some other places. She's been to Africa. She was down in Atlanta, etc. So she's getting around. And Gil said we need to
Expose her.
Yes, expose her. But of course,
he needs to put that on tape too. He needs to put it. Does he have that on tape?
Yeah. Well, what happened when we connect like that? Gil calls and he's excited, and he uses me as he sounds things off of me, and then he can't do it with Dr. Ben. He would like to do it with Dr. Clark, but it's going to be rough to reach this guy up in glory, because he's dealing with Marcus Garvey and Harriet Tubman. He ain't got time for Gil Noble. And Dr. Ben was Gil's partner, because Dr. Ben would always run down to get some help from Gil, a few dollars if he needed it, and it would be like a sanctuary. But now Doc being injured with his last challenge, he's not speaking sharply yet. He's coming back. So Gil had to bounce it off of me. So I could feel his distress on how can we do something? How can we make this available for our people? How can we put this in some kind of archives so that white folks don't come along 5 or 10 years from now and write up our thing, and here it is being explained by our people. So he didn't need to say that to me because Dr. J always has a plan. Some scheme, some plot, some plan that I can pull out. And so I said, Gil, I said, this sister is fantastic. And you can imagine what she can contribute. But I said, there are thousands of her. I see them all the time wherever I travel. And so what we've got to do is get them recorded in some way. So we've decided to try to bring our people together for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So you will publicly see a conference activity announced. But the secret agenda is to bring them together so that we can spend a couple of hours in private at Clark House so they can lay out who and what they really are. Just like she did. Now she mentioned a brother who we all know, but we don't know how serious he has impacted on people until they testify. So her testimony was that Dr. Edwin Nichols transformed her life. And then she's building on Dr. Naeem Akbar's work. And because of her clinical development and whatnot, she's adding to what they had thought. So she didn't say, I'm out there, I just discovered this. She said, I've been exposed, I moved in this direction, I'm building on top of this. And that's what's happening with generations of her, that we have to begin to link up. So Gil and I agree that we're going to start bringing people together. And they may make a presentation, but the thing that we want them to make, see, because when we have these conferences, the people say, well, Dr. I want you to come down. We're having this big conference in Columbia, South Carolina. And I want to put you on a panel with Naeem Akbar and Dr. Wade Nobles. And it's going to be chaired by Dr. Asa Peter. And we're going to give each of you 10.5 minutes to make a presentation. Now, that's a joke. Well, what can anybody say meaningful intent? That's why when Malik told me to try to make a strong presentation in 15 or 20 minutes, I said I have to write this out. I ain't got time for no sidetrack, no sidebars. I got to come right with I want to say, etc. So what we've decided is to have the conference with the 20 minutes, half an hour presentation, but the real deal will be having had 2 to 3 to 4 hours with somebody letting their soul out. Asa was honored, Dr. Asa Heed, a couple of weeks ago in Atlanta. His family surprised him at his 70th birthday. And Asa is one of the smartest persons on the planet. But his family knew how to fool him. So no matter how smart you are, your wife knows that your shit stinks like everybody else. Your children know your weaknesses, etc. So they planned that thing and sent out invitations to tell people it's a secret they're having this birthday party. I said, I don't think you send stuff out. Somebody's going to goof up and somebody's going to mess up about this birthday party. So what the family did, and of course, I went down to Atlanta with my wife, and no, she couldn't go. I went down to Atlanta to represent us, and I forgot my invitation. So I didn't know what time it was. And so I called the house, and I got his little grandchild, and they passed me on to Poppy. And Poppy was Asa. That's not the person I wanted to talk to. And so I told him I was there because I had to go to my grandfather's grave. I'm trying to get the schoolhouse that they built at the turn of the century down there in Kelly, Georgia, and which I was. That's one of the reasons why I came. But I really was calling his house to find out about the birthday thing. And so he says, well, you should come over. Today's my birthday. We're celebrating my birthday. My great aunt came in from Texas. Somebody else came in from Mississippi. You know, the kids are here. So you come on over. This is a birthday celebration. I said to myself, you're a fool. You don't know that the thing is tomorrow. And so they had their little family thing. And then the next day at the Atlanta Life, you know, they have a big black insurance company. They have a new building and an auditorium and paintings, blackbirds. So that's where it was that evening. So I went down to my grandfather's and then I rushed back. And we got the auditorium was packed with folks. Wade Nobles had come in with his wife Vera. She was in the wheelchair. And he was making a presentation And of course, Marin Bonney and a whole host of people came in from South Carolina, Bernie Gorman and whatnot. And so you had a good representation of us there. And his family, all 3 generations participated. And his son, he has a son, Hassan. And Hassan was the MC for part of it. And then one of his other daughters handled the MC. Him and his wife was sitting there like Queen Mother and Paramount Chief King. And then when he got up to speak, they really didn't want him to say much because they had planned this dinner, you know. And but once he got to the mic, and he was so touched by the whole thing that he ran down a whole story of his life. And y'all don't have a clue of what moves us. And unless you have that understanding of what's in us and what we feel and what we've experienced, you can't even make a judgment about any of us. And so he was telling this story about his family. I thought I knew him, but knowing him for 25 or 30 years, but no, I didn't know the story that moves him, and the stories he's finding out about his own family, a great-grandfather, a grandfather who was separated from the grandmother, and she was sold out of Mississippi or Alabama to Texas. And this love affair that they had was such that he got himself out of slavery, either fled the plantation or bought his way out, and walked 400 to 500 miles until he found his wife. And you know, so he said that's just part of the family history. So he was detailing the different parts of the family history. And so, having experienced this over and over again myself, I told Bill, these are the stories we need to record and have in the Black archives, not ABC's archive, but have in our archive. So that's one of the reasons for doing this 3-week activity. This will probably be phase 1. We'll probably do it again.
You gonna tape it?
Gil's gonna tape it.
Okay.
My problem is to try to keep away the interlopers. You see, I can just see it now. My buddy Clemson Brown. You mean to tell me you gonna let Gil tape it, Len, and I'm not gonna be there? I can just see Joseph now. You know, I'm gonna blow your whole shit. I'm gonna take it to the CIA. I know where you're gonna be and what you're doing. You ain't so you gotta let me get in there. No, the larger activity, which is gonna be open to the world, you're all gonna be there. But when we do the private thing, so people can express themselves, and you don't know what nuggets you're gonna find. That's what's moving us. Now, how can I tie that to some of this other stuff that we're doing? Most of us know the black man that is now Dr. Ben, but very few of us know him. You'd have to go into Dr. Ben's wallet. And when we had our activity at City College a few months back, I had him go in that wallet for the first time, because I didn't know what was in there, except when I traveled to Barbados with him. You'd have to go in there and have Dr. Ben pull out a picture of his mom, looking like you. You've never seen his mom. His mama looking like you. That he has this enormous love affair with, as most of us have. But the love affair with the mama is counteracted by a love-hate affair with the grandma, the Puerto Rican side. And so Dr. Ben has been living out this love affair and this love-hate affair. The scars that the grandmother and how people put on him, he's still living out. They had special names for him, this dark thing in this light Puerto Rican family. And so you can't understand, you know, I was trying to understand it because we want Dr. Ben to stay on the case, deal with the Nile, deal with the pyramids, and then he's veering off dealing with the personal thing. And it's getting worse over the last few years because he stays on it. He don't even deal with the pyramids and the temples no more. It's just a personal thing, because that's the thing that's eating at him. Then I went to Barbados with him and almost got killed. You know, me being an African, Pan-African, when people called about Dr. Ben going to Barbados, I told him, I said, you can't have him come down to Barbados by himself. Who's going with him? And so our original idea was to have Gertrude go with him, so you know, because Doc shouldn't be traveling by himself. But then these young fellows, who are the new generations coming up under us, they have connections in Barbados, and they have a store, and they have a health food store, and they have an artifact store, and they have a bookshop, and they, you know, and they set up forums. That's why I said this woman that we saw, Joy O'Leary. She's got her counterparts all over, because I met them. So what the folks said was, well, Dr. J, will you come and carry his bags and push his wheelchair? So I said, yes. And so Gertrude wasn't, you know, asked to come, and they asked me to go, so Dr. Ben and I went. When you hear Dr. Ben and you get this bitter thing he comes out with against the Rastafarians. I hope we ain't got no Rastas here.
You did that in Canada.
Almost got me killed. When we got to Barbados, they wanted to honor us, and so they had all of this African display outside, dancing and libations and drumming and carrying on. And I had pushed Dr. Ben when I got down. I was looking for a wheelchair, so I pushed him in the terminal. And then when we met the people who was greeting us and getting us through, and then we got out, I told Doc I thought we was coming to Little England, but instead we come into Little Africa. In other words, a new group of folks is emerging on the scene. And so after we left, and they took us to this fantastic hotel, which was an ecological hotel, and that son of the Caribbean and the setting where we were in, Dr. Ben said, forget the wheelchair, I don't need that thing anymore. So the next few days, he wasn't worried about no wheelchair. And when we had our first meetings with the group of people, about 50 or 60 of them, and that was an inner meeting. And then the next day we had a big meeting at the forum, the labor forum, and there was 500 or 600 people, even filled the balcony. And then that's when some of the Rastas was there. And that's when Dr. Ben took off. Oh God, he beat up on Haile Selassie. And the beating was so bad that he had Haile coming to Jamaica. And which he did go. And because of the excitement of God coming to Jamaica, the Jamaicans knocked over the security fence and started rushing toward the plane to touch the hem of his garment. And he wasn't no fool. How you doing, brother? He wasn't no fool. Haile Selassie started heading back toward the plane. And Dr. Ben had him running into the plane scared to death of the Rasta. And so, I mean, he was just so hard. So I had said the day before, you have to be prepared for Dr. Ben. He's going to say things to shake people up and wake them up, etc. So after he said all that, I grabbed the mic, because one sister was desperately hoping for something positive. She was a Rasta leader, and he wasn't giving her nothing. And so I grabbed the mic and I said, well, I told you that Dr. Ben will be raising issues and raising them strong, and it's going to be rough. Doc looked at me, grabbed the mic. He said, this is what I said, this is what I meant, and you too. Here I'm there trying to protect him. In fact, when he was so bad, I told the folks, I said, don't rush, don't let nobody rush up to the podium here, because I got martial arts training. I was to try to keep them neutralized. But Dr. Ben didn't give up. The next day he continued. And, but then you say, well, why? He's got so much positive. And you have this thing where he says he's born in Ethiopia, but then he's got Caribbean roots in Puerto Rico and St. Croix. And so you've got to weave all these things together. And his father was an Ethiopian ambassador by the Emperor of Ethiopia before Haile Selassie. So when the coup came and Haile Selassie, people overthrew the existing government, then Dr. Ben was a man without a country. And his father had married a Puerto Rican, so they had been the ambassadors to Brazil or to the Caribbean for Ethiopia, and so now he had to find a home in St. Croix and Puerto Rico, and the people did not want these black people roaming around them as family. It was rough. So I'm saying that Dr. Ben has made a monumental contribution, and nothing should take from that. But you got to find out what's eating at a person, what's motivating them, what has helped to develop their sacred mission. And with Dr. Clark, it was the same type of thing. Not on the negative side with Dr. Clark, it was on the positive side. Dr. Clark had these women that helped to make Dr. Clark, and he calls them, he says, I had 3 deities in my life. My grandmother, my mother, and my 5th grade school teacher, Evelina Taylor. And those women told him, as far back as he can remember, that he's going to be somebody. And instead of leaving a negative scar on his psyche like Dr. Ben has from the grandmother and others, he just has positive from the experience. His negative comes from living in a society that told him you can't go to a library because you're black, you can't get a good schooling because you're black. And so Dr. Clark was self-taught. Dr. Ben, because he had a bourgeois background, was able to go to all these schools, etc. So he has this unusual background of lawyer, engineer, and all the rest of it. But Dr. Clark is just the opposite. But it's interesting that both of them become the twin pillars of light in the African world struggle. And but you can't know who they are unless you know their background. And I've been trying to tell people that you can't know who I am unless you know Newark. And that I'm from Newark. But I'll tell you one thing, I know that we should put this on tape. My wife and I had a trauma last night. She was born in Harlem. Anybody born in Harlem should be used to difficult situations. Well, people come up from South Carolina, you know that's difficult. She married to me, that's difficult. You know, I'll sell everything we got to take care of the struggle that we go on without. You know, so it's no difficult situation. And we went, she didn't make the march because we had these other activities, and we were supposed to go to Winston Mansion, and they were supposed to go to Trenton, and for the Marcus Garvey School. They had a celebration of the independent black school. Brother Infaducci and his people are part of that. So I did the Million March and rushed off to pick up my wife. Traffic was bad, got there a little late. She was ready to go, so we jumped in the car to go down to Newark. And we tried to find the Winston Mansion school, and couldn't find them. Even the Winston Mansion was dark, etc. And we were driving around that whole military park, Lincoln Park, trying to find it, couldn't find it. And so then we said, it's probably over, and so we should drive off to Trenton. Actually, it wasn't over. I learned from my buddy Ken Travitt that they had canceled it and postponed it to next week, but they didn't call me because they had asked me to open it up with a libation, and I said I couldn't do that, make that commitment, because I'll be on the avenue in Brooklyn, and I don't know when I'll be able to come back. So I couldn't make that commitment, but they didn't call me, so we went down to Trenton. And of course, we made a wrong turn. And by the time we got to Trenton, things were over. But we just wanted to go. We were joyriding at that point. And we were on State Street, South State Street, at night. My wife said, "What is this? Where are we?" And then the young brother who was the head of the school, he said he was born down the street. He said, It's not so bad in the day. But, so we proceeded to drive around Trenton, because he said the high school is up the street, and we spent all last night trying to figure out what the hell happened to Trenton.
Just bad.
I mean, y'all thought Camden was bad? Patterson. Newark is a paradise. We drove around. We ain't seen no new housing, just coming off the parkway here and turning down and going to see all that new housing that's on 14th Street, 18th Street, 17th Street, just over here in this neighborhood. You ain't got that in Trenton.
No, sir.
It's unbelievable. People living in pre-Civil War housing. No, nothing. I said, there ain't even a basketball court. She said, at least you gotta have some relief. I said, it's unbelievable. You know, I'm gonna have to ask Councilman Tucker when I see him in the day. Is this what the capital of New Jersey is supposed to be? And then we had passed the sign that said the Capitol Complex. So Robin said, well, maybe let's go to the Capitol Complex. Maybe there's something there. And sure enough, you go across the bridge a little bit, and then they got, you know, some big buildings, plazas, and they remodeled the old buildings, the War Memorial, this and that. So that's the Capitol Complex. So, and then they got the Marriott Hotel. So people can actually drive by all of this mess and get to the Capitol Complex. But it's a disgrace. This housing should have been torn down long ago. You can't even remodel this housing. Block after block after block. So I figured there must be another area of Trenton that's a little different than this one. Because the brother had said there's a black community on the other side, and that's Martin Luther King Drive or Avenue. So I went over there to try to find Martin Luther King. And I didn't never found it, but I found the same old mess on the other side. I couldn't believe it. Look, I have been everywhere. Brazil, crazy people from the Caribbean. I've been in Montego Bay, Jamaica, Trenchtown. I've been everywhere. Ghana, Senegal, walking through market. I ain't never been afraid for my life. We made a wrong turn and was going down an alley. I said, oh shit, I hope ain't nothing. I said, this big old car driving down here, people might be waiting for us. I said, I hope there's a way out of this place. How do I turn the corner? And look, I was actually scared. I was scared, so, but Rob said, well, we gotta help these young people. If these young people are trying to deal with this, we gotta help them. She said, well, did you give the sister the book? This is the book that Malaki Asante produced that my wife and Booker Coleman and others worked on. And I showed her this because her husband teaches a middle nature class in my house with 10 people on Mondays. And so I gave her the book. I was willing to give her the book, but she said, we're using it in the school. We're already using the book. So Robin said, we got to give them as much books and stuff as we can. This is what they're dealing with. Because even she has come into Trenton, but she's coming with a church group, and they go to their church. So she had never seen anything. She said, this is the only thing that I can think of. This is slavery. This is slavery time. She said the only comparison, she said even down south, and she's right, because I drove around Sumter, South Carolina for hours a couple of weeks ago doing her family reunion. And even Sumter, South Carolina ain't got this type of concentrated rot. And it ain't black folks' fault. The society should never have had it. It should be, Trenton should be redeveloped as the capital of the Garden State. Robin said, where's the gardens? The houses are right up to the street. You know, it's that old pre-Civil War thing where you don't even have a little yard. You're right up into the street. And then when you do have a porch, you got 10 people sitting on the damn porch, you know? At any rate, what we've been involved in is the retrieval of African humanity. And this has been the great contribution over the last 50 years of our generation. So we're blessed to have so many people coming up under us that have been touched by this and have refashioned their lives. It's happening everywhere. I just got a call from Andy Thompson in Brazil. He just came back from Brazil. He said the Brazilians are saying you have to come back you have to come back to Brazil on November the 20th. That's when they're celebrating the National Black Brazilian Day. And this year, they're raising reparations. So a few years ago, Brazilians had trouble raising the question of racism because it was supposed to be a model, non-racist society, which is BS. But now they're raising the question of reparations. And last time I was there, they actually marched 55,000 marched on the capital of Brasilia to declare Brazil a racist state. And that was at the same time we had gone up into the mountains to Zumbi, to Palmares, with the president of Brazil for the first time. He went up there because they had declared it a national black day, a national Brazilian day, not a national black day. And even Pele, who was the Minister of Youth and Sports, he went up, and Benedita de Souza, this beautiful black woman, we went up. So I had known that the black people who are conscious aren't up in the mountains, they are marching on Brasilia. I would have marched on Brasilia. We flew through Brasilia to come up to Maceió. And, so the Brazilians, there are people in Brazil trying to catch up with this explosion of African information. And that's our great contribution, the contribution of these generations that we're dealing with now. What have they done? In order for you to have a system of development, three things have to be linked: economics, politics, and culture. And I was saying that yesterday. In order to have black power is not a word, it's not a phrase. Black power is a process. Black power is a way of life. And in order for us to manifest black power and to empower ourselves in any true way, we've got to have a handle on our economics, our productive, creative capability. And then that economics is controlled by a political mechanism. Politics is not what politicians do. Politics is what you do to control your life. Politicians should be involved in the economics for the community, so that this twin pillar of power, economics and politics, is what we've been able to see, understand, and raise issues around. But if you don't have the capstone of this, at that triangular framework that I'm dealing with, economics, politics, if you don't have culture to speak to what your economics should be, and you don't have culture to tell you who to do your politics with, then you'll wind up in a confused and chaotic state that we are as black people everywhere. Ain't nobody can puff up their chest and say, we got it right. It ain't happening in Jamaica. It ain't happening in Marcus Garvey. It ain't happening in the Virgin Islands. Because I was just down there. And as much as we got these young people coming up in Barbados, it ain't happening there. Because when Brother Small now raised the question of the racism, they went to Barbados for a reparations racism conference, and to have slavery declared a crime against humanity, white folks in the Caribbean that are so comfortable with, black people in the Caribbean that are so comfortable with white folks, brought them into the meeting. Now the blacks that are in England that are always with white folks, some of them married to them, definitely working with them, the black folks in England said, we didn't come to the Caribbean for a racism conference to have white folks in here. White folks don't need to be in here. So once that was raised, then you had a big storm, and Brother Small had to get in the middle of it, because Barbados is trying to carve out a niche of being a conscious place where these conferences can take place, and this strategy of reparations can be mapped out. And they even have a ministry of black affairs, etc., which nobody else had. But all of that was in jeopardy because of a couple of white folks. Now, and as quiet as it's kept, the white folks was the wives of black people. And see, when you got a wife situation, many of these black men, and I guess we switch it over and say black women, they so comfortable with their wives that they figure that they is black. So they might as well come on in, and even if I can't make it, let them sit in, they can tell me what happened in the session. That's what happens when you get this type of connection. Now, you all say, Dr. J, you ain't real love. A year or so ago, I went to a birthday celebration at LaGuardia Airport, one of those hotels. Gil Noble, his beautiful wife, Jean. Marcus Garvey, his beautiful wife, Jean. Both of these Jeans from Jamaica. Deal with Jamaican roots, and Garvey with Jamaican roots. Marcus Garvey Jr. We was going to celebrate the birthday of his younger brother, Dr. Julius Garvey, medical doctor. And while we're sitting there, Dr. Julius Garvey's wife was there, a European American. I felt uncomfortable, but didn't seem like anybody else felt uncomfortable, so I had to get rid of my problem. But then when they asked me about, did I know her? I said, oh yes. Because I didn't want to reach out and shake her hand, so I was holding my hand back. And then she said, no, he doesn't know me, so then I had to pull out my hand. My mama told me how to be polite, even though I was raised here on 14th Street in North New Jersey, and 4th Street in North New Jersey. She told me, but here we are, the Garvey family, talking about the UNIA in Costa Rica and Panama and what we need to do and the strategies we need to have. And there she is. And we was operating as if she didn't exist. Not only does she exist, she got an attitude. She got such an attitude that when Julius Garvey was the chairman of the board of Clark House, Regent Adelaide Sanford, Betty Dobson and others would have to call him at his house. And she would answer the phone with attitude. Okay. So I know she got an attitude, because it always happened. But these are the things, the contradictions and stuff we got to work with. I went to St. Croix to deal with the Ma'afa and deal with reparations. It was fantastic, because St. Croix has forts, slave forts and whatnot, that have their carbon copies in Ghana and whatnot. So this was important history for me. Of course, when the people, Johnny Youngblood's church brought me there, and so when they brought me, they met me at the airport, and they took me to this hotel, and we had to go over the mountain, and then down the mountain, and right at the foot of the mountain, nestling along the ocean, there was this Calabella Beach Hotel. And so, it wasn't a revolutionary spot, but I said, I got to deal with it. And so we went there, and it was beautiful. They don't want you to walk, so they got these carts that drive you around. It's not just a hotel room. We had a living room, half the size of this, the biggest bed I've ever seen, a walk-in closet, bedroom with the 2 sinks, and a set of kitchen. And then we had an extra room screened in that had couches around it looking out toward the ocean. So I said, look, Dr. J, given what you've given to the world's struggle for African peoples, you need to deserve a day in the sun and have your fun. And so we participated, had to get up early in the morning to go to a sunrise thing. So we're standing there as the sun rises, because this is the closest point to the New World. So we had the ceremony, ritual there. And so, it was fantastic, it was beautiful. And when we finished, then we had to go, after 5 days, we had to go to Jamaica, because one of my staff members' daughters, she's like a goddaughter, Buhati, she was getting married, and her and her fiance, I thought he was from Jamaica, no, she said he's from South Central Los Angeles, but they had gone for their engagement to Montego Bay, to the Half Moon Resort. And so they wanted to go back there for the wedding. So here we are in this unbelievable setting, Sunrise Beach, with this wedding. I said, it can't get no better than this. Now, Perezi had a mansion. They have these mansions, 7 bedrooms, your own swimming pool, and then you walk past your swimming pool out to the ocean. You got your own cook, and you got your own maid to clean up. I said, who the hell thought of these type of things? My wife and I, we didn't get there in time for that. But we had a nice suite that had a bar. A regular bar, 4 or 5 people could sit at. I said, where's the desk? How am I going to write, take some notes, work on my memoirs? I said, ain't no desk. I ain't never been in a hotel that you ain't got no writing space. They did have a table on the balcony. And so I tried to write on the balcony. But can you ever imagine writing on the balcony with the ocean waves crashing against the shore, with the palm trees swaying in the breeze? There was no writing. After they had, and food. And down the street we could swim with the dolphins. I said, what kind of shit is this? Who created this? I know Marcus Garvey's spirit is up the road, but I said, we got to get out of here. I told Ross, I said, I'm losing my fighting edge. I'm not going to be ready to continue the struggle. We got to leave here. I woke up in the morning, I called the airlines, I said, can we get out of here today? And the woman said, well, there's a flight at 2 o'clock. If you can get here. I said, we'll be here in a couple hours. We packed and got our asses out of Montego Bay earlier than we were supposed to. It was too set up. It was too seductive. Reality. There was no way. I had to check my reality. What is this? Etc. And so, so we got to understand that as we struggle, we're going to run into some pitfalls. And some of them may be some deep pitfalls, some sinkholes. You may not get out of there. So you got to stay on top of the game. But the message is that we are on a victorious path. And the victorious path is not atomic bombs, because we ain't got them. Laser bombs, we're stealth fighters, we ain't got them. But we have this enormous truth on who and what we are. And it is that we've mastered over this last 50 years. That's been the revolution. Over the last 50 years, I call it the greatest period of the African experience. And the greatest triumph of African peoples. Because for the 500 years before, the invasions of Africa and the establishment of the slave system with the blessing of the Pope had devastated African peoples. Confusion in Africa, Africans taken out in the holds of ships, with their sense of self destroyed, the family split up, with psychic scars left on them, with the whole world stamping them as not human. And we survived 400 to 500 years of that. But you can't say that that doesn't leave any scars. That's why that woman's presentation was so real. She said, we got layers of scars. We not only have the normal confusion that people have if they're poor or if they're hurt. We got layers and layers of that stuff. Right. When people tell me, like my father, as a baby left Georgia, he didn't make this decision, but his family said, like my cousin Jesse, the one who comes here once in a while, his father said, when I left Georgia, I made up my mind I ain't never going back. What scars did they experience that they wasn't going to never go back to the place where they was born? And my father, he was a 3-year-old when he left there to go to Ohio. He said he would never go back and never went back. And the one who said he wouldn't go back, Jesse, he was a minister. And he said if he did go back, he'd go back packing. Meaning ready to take some crackers out of here. So we have to understand the deep scars that are on our person. But again, a pyramid of African empowerment has worked for us. Ontology. This is Dr. Wade Nobles. He'll be one of the people coming in, along with Asa Hayes and Richard King. Those are the people, Naim Akbar, those are the people we're going to be bringing in for that 3-week period, starting in September 19th. Ontology, epistemology, and axiology. And what our scholars and what our leaders have done and elders have done is to deal with this ontology. Ontology is just a fancy word for being. Who are you? And there's a lot of confusion about who we are. Again, I had a couple hundred students on Wednesday. And I asked my students, how many Africans we got in the class? And out of 60, 3 hands go up. And all of them look like you're all here. I said, what we got here? 6 Jamaicans, 4 Trinidadians, a couple from St. Kitts, 5 from Haiti, 8 from the Dominican Republic, 6 from the Bronx, 5 from Jamaica, Queens, not the I. It is amazing that they are running to my class. They must know that you don't come into Dr. Jeffries' class unless you are able to say you're an African. So I said, okay, before you get out of here, we're going to have us some Africans. And then I require that their first essay, because I require 10 analytical essays, their first essay is to go home and tell your mama, tell your papa, tell your grandmama, tell your significant others, tell your brothers and sisters that you're African. And then be prepared to defend yourself, because some people might come with some karate blows, so you better have some karate defense. They might try to take you out of here. I can just see some grandma, they done worked hard to be white, and you coming in with this African stuff. Grandma will take you out of here. Where's my shoe? I'll show you where you can go. But my idea is for them to see what Africa has meant to them growing up, and what has been burned into their psyche before they even could think or blink. The ideas of a negative Africa were burnt into their psyche.
That's right.
And so I want them to see what beingness is all about, and how it's influenced by epistemology, which is knowing. And what we know comes from the European stream of knowledge. It doesn't come from the African, Asian, or even Native American stream. It comes from the European stream of knowledge, which is a distortion based upon the big lie of white supremacy. And so we've got to understand that as we get into knowledge and get these degrees. I said we got to neutralize ourselves from the poison of these degrees that have the Greeks raised on a pedestal as the most prominent people in the universe, and people of color all over the world were prominent for thousands of years before any Greek could read or write or have a serious thought. But still institutionalizing these PhD, BBDs, and all these other degrees is this mess. So, beingness, we're African. Period again. Nature and nurture. Nature is your gene pool. Your gene pool is African. In fact, everybody's gene pool is African, if you really want to go there.
Yeah.
Okay? So we can clearly say without a blink that we're African.
Yes, sir.
Now, nurture, that's another thing. Nurture is your socialization, how you were brought up,
yes, sir.
what values were instilled in you. And that's chaos for practically all of us. Dr. Ben is living the chaos. Luckily, he had the Nile Valley that got him out of there, so he could refashion his inner turmoil around the Nile Valley, that we were the premier people of the universe, and he could stretch it from the zenith in Egypt through Ethiopia down into the Sudan, to Central Africa, to the mountains of the moon. So that gave Dr. Ben a chance to really develop his ontology, his beingness. So he even came up with his own term, Alchemist, for the Nile Valley. You don't even like Kemet. You use Tal Seti and Talmera, but Dr. Ben. Now, that's power. Wade Noble said, taken from his teacher, Dr. Nathan Hare, power is the ability to define reality and have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. Power is the ability to define reality and have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. And that's why I claim victory for us over these last 50 years. Because we redefined who and what we are. And the world is responding to that definition. Jewish people can't sit comfortable knowing that we are doing this redefining for ourselves. The Catholic Church can't sit comfortable. They're even talking now about a black pope, because they know black people are redefining what the Catholic Church has been all about. The whole university system has been trying to cover up this enormous truth that we raised and put in the books. And so now they are rewriting the books, talking about the new sociology, the new world history. And here they are, Egypt with a page and a half, and they jump right into the Greeks, saying they deal with world history, and making sure they knock us out of the flow of courses, because they know what we're teaching. And that's why this book is so extraordinary, because this represents the victory. Our lack of fully understanding what was happening had us participating in a charade. And I was the leader of the charade. We were meeting I was asked to be a part of a committee organized by the Commission of New York to revise the curriculum. And in 1987, 88, they had just revised the curriculum in 87, and they took Africa out of the curriculum. They took the Nile Valley out of Africa. And so when I'm reading these documents on how to teach this material, I said, where the hell's the Nile Valley? And I'm looking at this teacher's document. I said, well, they said they're going to put it in another part of the world. I said, well, the Nile Valley is in Africa. Why are you putting it in another part of the world? And then when I go to the other part of the world, which is the Middle East, I'm looking for Africa. I'm looking for some content in Africa. They put Africa they took Africa out of Africa, put it in the Middle East, and then denuded it of content. I said, this is no happenstance. This is a planned process. They couldn't deal with the system of Ma'at. The word Ma'at is not mentioned. Here's a whole moral, ethical value system that was at the heart of Nile Valley civilization for 5,000 years. And you can't mention it? If you understand the war of the mind that we're in and the war of cultures that we're dealing with, they can't mention it. Because they have said God spoke to them before anybody else. God revealed himself to them. And so you have the revealed religious traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Everything else before that is pagan. Barbarianism. Not worth anything. So here you have a system of moral and ethical values that is before Judaism, before Christianity, before Islam, and you can read it, you can understand it, and you know it's as worthy as any wisdom system ever devised by humanity. In fact, this is the foundation of Judeo-Christianity, Islam. Right. So they can't have you come into the Nile and know this. And even if you know it, that's all they want you to do. Don't make it a part of your life. Don't make it a part of your ontology. You're revisiting who and what you are and who and what your children are. And don't come to no conclusions that you're the chosen people, which is what our people are coming. I listen to the people on the platform yesterday. People are talking about we are the chosen people, from the youngest to the oldest. Even Regent Sanford said we are the chosen people. Reverend Daughtry, all of them. And so we are now redefining who and what we are. Whereas in this society, and in the Caribbean and Brazil, we were defined as property, not even worthy of human dignity. So you have to understand how far we've come and how far we've cemented this thing in the last 50 years with this knowledge and understanding. This explosion of now, which we can date from not Dr. Ben, although he goes back to 1938. When I was a one-year-old child here in Newark, New Jersey, I was probably getting circumcised. But at the time I was getting circumcised at Mount Sinai, at Beth Israel Hospital. I went to church at Mount Sinai. When my brother was born in Beth Israel, my mama took me over there and had me sculptured. And so that's at the time Dr. Ben was in the Nile looking at the sculptured penises. In other words, if you look at God Mim, there he is with an erect penis. You look at some of the other symmetry and symbolisms and stuff, and you see this erect penis. In fact, the most sacred symbol of the Nile is the erect penis. It's the obelisk, so-called, the Tekken, that which we call the George Washington Monument. And so all over the world, you see that as a symbol of regeneration and rebirth in people's cemetery. And in their sacred institutions, like the Masonic orders and this and that. But nobody references it as African. You can go to Africa and see that it's there. You know that these symbols were taken from in front of the great university temples and dragged across the Mediterranean up the peninsula and flopped into Vatican Square and a cross put on it. You know that Napoleon people took it out and flopped it in their Place de Concorde. The greatest avenue in France is the Champs-Élysées, and at the base of it is the Place of Peace. And at the middle of it, the Place of Peace is, in the middle of the Place of Peace, Place de Concorde is from the temples. They got one in Central Park in New York. They call it Cleopatra's Needle. Cleopatra didn't have a damn thing to do with it. It's the African spiritual symbol of resurrection, rebirth, regeneration, the triumph of good over evil. Schools of knowledge come out of that symbol. The biggest one is down in Washington, and we are taught to worship it as we are taught to worship white men, their ignorance, and their lie. And that's an African symbol. That's what I had to say yesterday. And of course, when it gets into the newspaper, people will say, there he is telling his stories again about the Washington Monument not having a damn thing to do with Washington, but having to do with Nile Valley civilization. And that the Lincoln Memorial didn't have anything to do with Lincoln, but it is the replica or inspiration of a pillared temple, and the greatest pillared temple is in the Nile Valley. Inspired the Greeks and inspired Solomon's temple. But so as soon as that gets out, they may have a resolution in the college board, throw his butt out again. We tried once before, I'm still there after 30 years. But this is a picture of the god Mem with the erect penis. And the erect penis actually is at the level of the umbilical cord. It's not down where the genitals are, but it symbolizes the male contribution to the birth process. But the deep symbol of this is the female ability to bring forth life. The female ability to nurture life, the female ability to resurrect life, the female ability and mission to form a sisterhood of life. All of that is in this symbol, and we think it refers to some white man. And that goes to relate to what I'm talking about. We haven't clarified our beingness, and then on the other side we got epistemology, which has nothing to do with pissing. It has to do with knowing. How do we know what we know? We know what we know from the system of white supremacy. Even when we go to their highest degree level, like Columbia University, where I got mine, Yale University, where my wife got hers, it is white nationalism that we're mastering, and not even an understanding of African traditions or values, and certainly not the Nile Valley. Jewish community has a big stake in keeping you out of the Nile, because if you have a Nile chronology, you're in there before they existed. You're in there before Abraham. If he is the first of their peoples, leaving Ur in Chaldea to come south and eventually into the Nile, how the hell could he build pyramids that were standing for 1,000 years before he got there? So once you put a timeline and the truth to these tales that they made sacred, then you understand why we are under such an attack. Our truth destroys the foundation upon which they built their lives. And so we may act like we're just putting in a few dates and including ourselves. We may think that's what we're doing, but we're actually devastating their story and beginning to move around our glory. And so the Nile Valley is key. We can't disabuse ourselves of the importance of it. But some of these young people don't have wisdom. A young fellow who's been in the Peace Corps, he's got good conscience. He was in Ghana this summer. He told me that as he was making away from himself at the reparations conference, that he's written a book, that we appreciate what you scholars have done. Well, I'm tired of all of y'all hanging around the Nile Valley and y'all ain't involved in nothing real. I said, what? I said, yeah, all y'all is back there in the Nile Valley. So I said, wait a minute, brother. Who? What one name could you present to me that's stuck in the Nile Valley? I said, you can't present Dr. Bennett, because Dr. Bennett opened up the Nile to us and proceeds to deal with making the Nile real. He tried to set up a secret society of the craft for men and women. He was making the Nile real. He wasn't keeping people back in the day. Dr. Clark forced us, when we set up ASCAC, to make it the Association of African Civilizations. So we didn't just focus on the Nile, that we saw African civilizations all over the continent. Dr. Asa Hilliard I told the brother, is this moment in his village in Ghana where he is a chief building a center. Dr. Wade Nobles is in Ghana in his village where he's already built a center, and he's there at this very moment with his wife in a wheelchair, with his children, and with his grandchildren. Tony Browder, who did produce a book, Nile Valley Civilization. It's a great book, and it has that symbol, that Tekken, etc. And Tony has given us great knowledge on the African influence in Washington, D.C. I said, Tony Browder is here yesterday. He was married in Ghana with a beautiful sister from Washington in an African traditional wedding. And the Africans wanted to do it with a certain authenticity, so in Africa, individuals don't marry. Families marry. And so these people, Janice, Tony Browder's new wife, and Tony, had to be adopted by two different families in Africa for the wedding process to proceed. So who are you talking about? You certainly ain't talking about me and my wife. We've been to the Nile. You ain't talking about Naim Akbar. Who are you talking about? You ain't talking about Marimba Ani. Who? Name one. You ain't talking about Malafi Asante. He's been to the Nile Valley, but he got his village of Tafu in Ghana. He's a Nana. Nana Aku, Nana Dix from the first film. Who the hell are you talking about? Then he backed down. You know, you had to go at him hard. You know, you had to go at him hard because we need to get this thing right. The beauty of what we've done is that we've redefined ourselves as Africans, the first people of the universe. And in terms of epistemology, we know that there's a flow of knowledge that's the first knowledge, the first word, the first wisdom, the highest wisdom, and that's ours. This other flow comes in as a Johnny-come-lately, not understanding what they inherited from Asian peoples, from Native American peoples, and from African peoples, and they distort it because their whole flow of knowledge is through the male filter. And they don't see the balance and harmony of the male and the female. They still can't give the woman a place spiritually in their world. The Pope is yet to allow women to have a place in the world. In fact, women, I think, in the Catholic Church just started lighting candles last year. They hang on to this mythology and they can't let it go. Last year, I think they also finally allowed Galileo to get out of purgatory. The sucker's been in purgatory for 300 years. When he came up with his ideas about how the solar system was, what the Africans understood for eons of years, and he said that the earth revolved around the sun and not the opposite, the Catholic Church said, if you don't recant this belief, if you don't deny it, you're not going to get into heaven. Even though he kind of fussed it and tried to deny it, they still wouldn't let him into heaven. So the church for years was studying this question, and they decided that we need to let them out of purgatory, let them into heaven, but they won't decide and state to the world that they were wrong, because the Pope can't be wrong. He's infallible. And so these are the principalities of insanity that we're up against, but our people have been working hard to establish Africa's claim to firstness. I'm going to try to run through it and quickly move off the dime. Because what we've done is enormous. I was educated with this $1 million white boy education, going all the way up to the PhD, studying in Europe, and studying in Europe and France. But Africa was planted in me on 14th Street here in New Jersey by my mother, whose father was a Garveyite coming up from Virginia. So there was always an African educational process alongside of this European process. So the 100 trips I've made to Africa have been my PhD, my postdoctoral work. Not sitting in the classroom with white folks trying to digest their lies. Whenever I got to those lies, I turned them around and tried to set them correct. I knew from the very beginning that they wouldn't tell the truth. Now this was an article in the New York Times, this is about 10 years ago. Africa's claim to Egypt's history grows one system. They still can't tell it. Africa's claim to Egypt's history is real. It's not, we're not making any claims to Africa. Egypt is in Africa. And so Asa Hilliard helped to brief the sister on this. And so she or the editors decided to put some lips up on there to confuse people. A bust of lips. And scriptures believed to be the head, a sculpture believed to be the head of Queen T of Egypt, who lived in the 14th century BC. Some historians, they call them revisionist historians, argue that she was a descendant of black Africans. This is the New York Times playing games. Now luckily, they didn't let us include a few black spots and dots in the curriculum of inclusion. They just knocked us out the box. That was the attack on me was about this. It wasn't about saying something about Jews and slavery. It was about the curriculum of inclusion. So they pushed us out of the insanity of trying to find a comfort zone with them into the reality of producing for our own. So this is the enormous victory of reclaiming Africa for us. This is the work of Dr. Maleficent, which Dr. Clark told him wasn't deep enough, he needed to revise it. He was smart enough to bring on board Booker Coleman, who is a grade school teacher, brilliant, knows the African tradition. My wife knows the African iconography and all that. Herb Boyd, who's a writer with consciousness. So by expanding his team, he was able to produce this work. A black artist from Brooklyn produced the cover, Mount Freedom, which includes Harriet Tubman, Fred Douglass, and King, includes Garvey, Du Bois, etc. It included Malcolm, but they took him out. And then my wife wanted to insist, and she made them go find. She said she wanted to make sure that they dealt with the African peoples as family. So the first imagery that they had is of a black family. Black man cradling a black youngster, his head, and the mother. So there'll be no question. This is the Khoikhoi people of South Africa. So this is the type of struggle for the mind that we're dealing with, the war. Whoever controls the images controls what? The self-esteem, the self-respect, the self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. So they don't want you to have a vision of being the first peoples. And then coming forth not only being the first peoples, but being the first peoples with the most. Now, and that's based upon not life, that's based upon DNA. The DNA studies and whatnot. So when they jumped on us about melanin, they now have to deal with their own DNA study. They have to change the map. That little map that they have running to museums and the textbooks ain't real. They got to go to the Peters map. So even Ralston tried to make sure that they, and Maleficent make sure that they put in the real map. And then the timeline. Once you put a timeline in somebody's head, you wiped out the European. The African timeline for the rise of Nile civilization, 5,000 BC at least. The Greek rise is 500 BC. The Greek Golden Age, as I learned it, is 500 BC to 300 BC, a 200-year period. They call it the Age of Pericles. That's where Aristotle and Plato and all of them, Hippocrates, did their thing. A 200-year period, and in Nile, you're talking about a 5,000-year period. But then back it up. You can't just show the dates. And so Ralston puts in something that just came up in the last 15, 20 years, the incense burner in Custo. Advanced Sertimer published when he produced his journal in 1979, 80, and then I wrote an article on it in 81. And then when Diop's book came out in 81, what did Diop do? He put the incense burner in the book. And then of course you got a big problem, who built the pyramids? Europeans are still claiming the damn pyramids. I got a picture of Mayor Koch on a camera saying his ancestors built the pyramids. And everybody knows my famous picture of Menachem Begin claiming that his ancestors built the pyramid. This is the New York Post, September the 9th, 83, at the Peace in the Peace Accords. And there's Saddam dancing, Sadat and Begin dancing in peace at the pyramids. And the article goes on to say that Menachem Begin, the greatest day of his life, was dancing at the pyramids that his ancestors built thousands of years ago. People don't miss a beat to try to claim our heritage, the stolen legacy. So Roslin said pyramids, the writing systems of Africa are there. They're in the great papyri, etc. And so Roslin, just to rub it in their face, the first color plate is created. And this, we can decode all of the knowledge flow from this. Okay. You put her in the picture, you go back in history 4,000 to 5,000 years, and you go up in history a couple thousand years. She's at the middle of the great rise of the Nile, in the beginning of the new kingdom. Before her, you have the middle kingdom, 500, 600 years of glory, and before that, you got the old kingdom, 1,000 years of glory, the pyramid age. Then after her is 1,500 years of glory, or more if you include Nubia. You're talking about 2,000 years of African building. Why include Nubia? Because she's from Nubia. She married into the royal family. She made the arrangements for Nefertiti to come in. As they twist the knowledge around, we all know about King Tut. But we don't know that the person who produced King Tut, either as mother or grandmother, is this black woman. European is interested in gold, so we know about the gold mask. But what we need to know as Africans about the royal family of generations that this black woman represented. Her husband expanded and rebuilt the Great Lodge of Luxor, the greatest building of the ancient world. So here you have a great woman and a great husband, great children, a great daughter-in-law. She brought in Nefertiti, but she's never recognized. A great love affair. The husband built magnificent temples for her around the Nile Valley, including in Nubia, and built a sacred lake around the Karnak temple in her memory. You talk about a great love affair. We don't have to go to the Taj Mahal, which occurred a couple of thousand years later. You got that monumental building of Africans as a part of it. And then if you want to know the writing, Roslin did the earliest. You know, Europeans got their caves in France. But Roslin said, look, we go to caves in South Africa.
Yes, sir.
You talk about the different writing systems, Guise and other writing systems in Africa, and then the written mathematical papyrus, which is in the British Museum. The whole mathematical papyrus is in the British Museum, blown up, and it deals with mathematics, geometry, and all of that. And it existed 2,000 years before anybody in Greece could read or write. So it is this that we're tapping into that's affirming our flow of knowledge, the step pyramid. One of the oldest and significant ancient buildings around it was a learning center, and it was built by Imhotep. And then who built the pyramids? Well, I wasn't going to play no games. She said, let me put their images there so there'd be no question of who built the pyramid. So how can you run into a picture where, a situation where you know the image of Queen T, but then you wind up showing her lips? That means somebody's playing games. And fortunately, our people have stopped playing games and we're starting to produce this type of work. That's why, for example, since we are now claiming Imhotep as the multi-genius, who is a symbol of the great mind for the world, that's why they are coming at us with their multimedia attack. The Mummy, 1999. The Mummy Returns, 2001, etc. The Scorpion King, 2002. They coming because they know we have the truth. And they don't hesitate to be bold and brazen with their lives. Taking Imhotep, the multi-genius that the world worshipped, the Greeks, ancient Greeks themselves made into this living African into a god, Aesculapius, and put him in the Hippocratic Oath. They didn't hesitate to make him the symbol of evil.
That's right.
In the Mummy Returns.
That's right.
Now, you know, some people say, that's terrible, Doctor. I said, no, that's the victory. That's the victory. You have to understand that our raising up the truth has been so enormous that they are not hesitating and maintaining these lives by all costs. And so that's what we've been a part of. And you can't see someone losing their job here, or someone not getting their publications here as the problem, the circumstance. This family of African peoples all over the world has been moving together to raise up African peoples, to take back our ontology, our epistemology, and our axiology, our values. And that's the key to our culture. The culture of confusion that we have is that we don't know who and what we are. We're buying anybody's garbage. We're consumer junkies of garbage. And so when we take back our axiology, our values, and learn that we can, that's what Robin was saying. Robin was saying that the people in Africa in their little villages live better than what we saw in Trent. Our regimented program enslavement. And at least in your village, you could grow your corn, you could raise your family. You may not have a TV, but at least in a car, but at least you got some values, some concept of self, some concept of humanity. And so we've got to get back to a value dynamic that speaks to us. And that's why Dr. Clark said it best, Pan-Africanism or perish. But what I want to be able to say is that when we go to our brothers and sisters and bring them into New York and try to take them, is to try to get into the deep processes, their deep thought of what moved them. Dr. J. Carruthers created a whole school out there in Chicago, the Kemetic Institute, and generations are going to that school. And Lefi Asante has been there at Temple and then created this graduate program that was producing hundreds of our young people. He was producing 200 doctorates. That's why they had to bring in a black woman to try to shut him down. Yeah. How can one black man be allowed to produce 200 doctorates? Do you know what that means? That they get the consciousness that we have and then they go out and spread it? And give you an example of it, and I'm going to stop. It happened in Atlanta.
Yes.
Morehouse.
Yes.
Morehouse is a place that is the epitome of the black success. The greatest black male institution. And in the 70s and 80s, Morehouse banned Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, banned Dr. Naim Akbar, who was the head of their psychology department, myself and others. It wasn't until a light-skinned dude called Dr. Finch, Charles Finch, and a light-skinned partner of his called Dr. Asa was able to neutralize the Atlanta light-skinned bourgeoisie and tell them to bring in this great scholar, Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. Now, since Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop's work was in French, that gave the Atlanta bourgeoisie something to titillate on. That this wasn't just an ordinary Negro, this was a French-speaking Negro. So they brought him in. The first year they tried to get him in, he didn't come because he was flying out of Dakar Airport, the plane skidded, and when it came to arrest, he said, let me off of this. So he didn't make the Atlanta conference. We had a conference in Los Angeles, organized by Jake and Carruthers that produced ASCAP, and they had a conference. We had two conferences because they wanted to bring in white folks. And I told them, let's agree to disagree. We'll do our African family thing. You can bring in white folks if you want. And that's what they eventually did. Diop did come the next year, and they honored him in Atlanta. His picture is in the King Auditorium, et cetera, et cetera. But that helped to legitimize the work that we were doing. So since then, we've been able to make inroads into the bourgeoisie down the South. But let me leave you with this. The knowledge that we are giving these youngsters up under us is enormous, but you can make that knowledge part of your empowerment. Dr. Diop's partner, Dr. Theophilus Banga, came to the United States. He lost his government position in the Congo, and he came to the United States, and we found a position for him with Lefi Asante in Philadelphia. And so Dr. Diop, I'm going to be finished in 2 minutes, Dr. Diop's work was carried by a living African, and he was now putting his hands on these youngsters. So he was a key player in helping to develop a young man and a young woman called Mario Beatty. And Mario Beatty had a sister partner with him in school, and he married her. So here you have not only the people getting the knowledge, but actually marrying and become a married team. So Mario is down in the Clark Atlanta complex teaching the teachings of Theophilo Banger and Diop to the students there. And one of the students that he taught is a brilliant dude, and he graduated 4.0. So when you graduate 4.0, that puts you in the run for being the valedictorian. So that means you make the speech at the graduation. This brother, such a good student, that they wanted to make him Phi Beta Kappa. But having defined himself, he knows what his ontology is, having understood the epistemology of African peoples in contrast to the epistemology of Europeans, and having some serious values, the brother said, you can't honor me with Phi Beta Kappa. The Greeks sat at the feet of my ancestors. Now that was a hurt in itself. But then when they came to make him a Rhodes Fellow, he said, that's an insult. Do you know who Cecil Rhodes is? So what I'm saying is, this is the type of youngsters coming up under us. Many of us, I might have said Phi Beta Kappa, I'll take it. You know, Rhodes Fellow, I would have known better than to take that. But I had my little Rotary International thing that's traveling in Europe. But the drama, and I want to tie this together because it's all very personal with that. The drama is that when my nephew, Hassan Kwame, named after Kwame Nkrumah, his brother Hakeem Sekou, named after Sekou Touré. Hakeem, a few years ago, graduated from NYU Law School at the top of the class, ahead of the Jews and the Asians. And in fact, his graduation speech was the 3 C's. And you know, his uncle has gone around the world talking about the African 3 C's, communal, corporative, and collective spiritual development. He took that and revised it for his message to a student. But his younger brother didn't go to the white schools, state university. He went south to the black schools. He went to Morehouse. He should have been the valedictorian, but he got 1 B. When he got it, I said, damn, you're disgracing the family. What is this? After 35 A's, you come up with a B. And they said, Uncle, I think I should have gotten an A for the class. I said, you damn sure should have. It's in religion. Your mama been dragging me to church ever since you could blink. So I said, go back to the professor and tell him to change the grade. He did. The professor agreed that he should have a change, but it wasn't no big thing for him. He wasn't worried about that. I mean, that's the type of youngster that we're producing. They can get A's and it ain't no big thing. It's what I do. And he never got a change. So he wasn't a valedictorian. So when he graduated in 94 or whatever it was, I went down there and I was feeling a little bad. See, that's my ego. I couldn't get all A's even if I tried. You know, and I'm worried about him. And then I saw why, because I'm walking around the Atlanta bourgeoisie with my biggest African robe on, and all these niggas is up there trying to look cute. Higginbotham is the graduation speaker, and he's taking the youngsters back through the 60s, through the 50s, back to the 40s, and I'm yelling and screaming, you can't do this, you can't do this. I wanted to go up and grab the mic, but you know, my mama trained me a little better. I had to be cool. So in order to chill out, I started walking around. And in walking around, I saw a group of 15 people. And the 15 people lifted my heart, because most of them were women, and you know I go for black women. But they were all dressed in African, men and women. So I just felt, in spite of the thousands of people trying to act Negro, here you had these Africans. And so that kind of chilled me out. Come to find out that the graduation speaker for the youth, who was the valedictorian, he did what I wanted to do, and better than I could have done. He took his class into the 21st century. He was so strong that the Morehouse people pressed the button and said, bring up the choir. And they brought the choir to push him off the stage. And they announced that he would be the first historically black college to have a Rhodes Scholar. So this was a big thing. This is status. A black man going. So I said, I need to get to him and try to get him to Africa before he gets on that Cecil Rhodes thing in England. And so I told his brother, I said, when your brother finishes with the press, I don't want to, since I was a big press issue, I didn't want to get involved in that. I said, when he finished with the press, I just want to congratulate him. And so the young man went down, talked to his brother, and told his brother that I wanted to speak to him. I didn't even know he knew me. He left the press, came up to me, got on his knees, and a salute. I had to drag him up off his knees. Then I congratulated him, and this and that. And I told him we're trying to hook up when we go to Africa, maybe he can hook up with us, because he was going to Senegal for 6 weeks. Now, the beautiful thing was that family in Africa, that was their child. So that just affirmed everything that I was, all about. I was feeling good, even though I was feeling bad that my nephew didn't get it. Now, here's the drama. I had a nephew in Morehouse who's not blood, but he's a fighter. And when I had my big fight, since his name is Jeffries, he started fighting for me, writing editorials to the newspapers, and people would respond to this Professor Jeffries. So he had to call me to say, look, I know it's not you, it's me. And some people think I'm your nephew. He was in Morehouse with my blood nephew. So I said, you are my nephew. In the African tradition, I'm your uncle. So don't even worry about it. Continue to do what you're doing. So this guy, Lawrence Jeffries, he's been a fight. He changed his name to Lucata. Now, he was with the Malcolm X grassroots movement. He was so good and so powerful, they wouldn't let him graduate. It took him 6 years to get out of Morehouse. They wouldn't even let him on the campus. I had to go down there and speak one time, and he wanted to come here and speak, and I had to go to security, and they said, you sign his ass in and you take his ass out of here when you finish. Because he was such a fighter. Now, he's finally married a woman. He was without a wife. He marries a woman who has 2 kids, and she's into the African thing. And they have a child, twins. So here the guy goes from no kids to 4 and a wife. But since she was so conscious, she said, you've got to get the degree. So she pushed him to get the Morehouse degree. So a couple of years ago, he's graduating from Morehouse. Finally, the graduation speaker is the student of Mario Beatty's, the valedictorian. You hear what I'm saying? The big graduation speech is being made by Nima Warfield, the fellow from Plainfield. He's since gone through the Rhodes Fellowship. He's now big, but he's coming back as the triumph of the bourgeoisie in Morehouse in producing a great black man. So here, Nima Warfield from Plainfield is speaking. My nephew is getting his little piece of paper, and Mario Beatty's student is the graduation speaker. Well, these kids are so slick. He gave the Morehouse people a graduation speech he did not intend to give. And then when he got to the mic, he told Bud. He told Bud about Phi Beta Kappa. He told Bud about Cecil Rhodes. He just told Bud. He was so terrible that they brought the choir up again. And in fact, the picture of the graduation, the video, has him coming up on a stage and leaving. There's not a word of him saying anything in the thing. And he was so strong that they said they would not allow a valedictorian. And a couple of years ago, the Morehouse students had a protest to get a valedictorian, and they said, we'll only allow you to do it if you sign an agreement that you won't be doing anything to embarrass him. Now this brother who was so strong to beat up on the other brother who was strong but had not had this Nile Valley thing that this brother had, the brother who was so strong to raise these issues is getting his PhD at Brown University in the mathematics of the pharaohs. Do you understand how deep that is? That we're producing up under us youngsters, once they touch this material, they can produce miracles. The mathematics of the pharaohs being studied by this brother who had the courage to stand up. And the last time I was with him, it was a bus ride. Well, did I drive down? No, I went on the bus. We got Winston Mansion of Frederica Bay was going down to support Dr. Shabazz at Lincoln because they was giving him a hard time. And so who comes in from Connecticut, Rhode Island, from Brown University? This brother is on the bus with us as we're going out to Lincoln to support Dr. Shabazz. So I'm saying there's a whole, this Leary who did this thing today with Gil, she she represents a whole generation of these people getting this knowledge with a consciousness, with a spirit, with a sense of mission. And so it's glory. I don't care how much Trentons I run into. I know there's some glory out there. I've seen it in Toronto. I've seen it in the Caribbean. I've seen it in Brazil. I saw it in French Guyana. I saw it in Martinique. When they asked me to come to Martinique, I said, I don't want to go to Martinique. They said, we want you to come to deal with reparations. I said, well, I'm thinking of Amy Césaire and his bow ties and whatnot, tie and jacket, etc. And so I went back to Martinique, and this time they wanted me to go to the people. And so we went to the communities dealing with reparations. We went to the mayors of the smaller towns that wanted this reparation. They were, what are we doing with reparations? They wanted it. And then when we finally did rush to meet Amy Césaire, he was there with his partner. He got this little light-skinned dude, his partner. And when I came in the room, he was looking at me peculiarly. And I said, well, what did I wear? I mean, I had a stack full of books and stuff, but, you know. And then he was saying, it's Dr. Jeffries who's the Diop scholar. And then I began to smile, you know. And then I had 15 books as a gift to Amy Césaire. Blueprint for Black Power, Dr. Clark's book, Dr. Ben's book, Falsification of African Consciousness. And so he told the fellow who was supposed to be my translator, because I didn't need a translator, he said, you're going to have to help me go through these books. So even an Amy Césaire that we kind of pushed off to the side, and I psychologically pushed off to the side, is still in the flow of things. And his people are hooking up with us for reparations. They brought me in, they had me on TV and whatnot. I didn't know the impact of these things. We were trying to rush to Amy Césaire, trying to get to the market, get through the market, to go up to his office, and the women in the market is going crazy. And I said, well, damn, what I got shit on my, what am I peeing my pants? They're talking all over, and they were talking in Creole. But what they were saying, that's the one that was on the TV. That's the one that was on the TV. Because they put it on TV and it just went across the country. So I'm saying there's an excitement, there's an empowerment that we're a part of. And we just have to make sure we make it real and spread it out to our people and continue to do what we're doing. Thank you.
All right.
You see the new flyers, right?
Yes.
Thanks again, Dr. Jeffries, for your most inspiring lecture. As always, we, family members out there, would like to thank you very much. And especially those who stayed around. We had one sister came from New York.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, she heard on the announcement, either on VI or
Why did she stay?
but she said she had to go back to work. Yeah, so
She don't leave a number in there.
no, the brother took her back. She had some jet lags, some great jet lags. So I don't know if she's from UAM or she said she was up in March yesterday, but she had left before you got here. So yeah, so she's coming from the DNA perspective of the origin of man and go to different parts. The New York Times did a piece in the science section a couple months ago, linguistic, in terms of the first languages. And here, and it's coming out of Africa. Here, all this vast information, and yet still we can't get it over to the masses of people. What more you think should be done? So we're going to get the question and answers now, so the folks can get home, so they can get to work tomorrow morning. You ready?
Yes, this chamber,
Okay.
y'all working in the morning. I have to go until 2.
Okay.
So could you answer that for me?
Yeah, I think our big challenge is to make the knowledge a part of our culture. Whereas now the knowledge is for the elite in the schools, and it really should be made a part of the culture. People who happen to be Jewish, for example, make sure that whenever they get a chance to put their thing forth, they do. The Jerusalem Report. Here they got all these problems in Iraq, and they make sure that they claim Iraq. Iraq, where Judaism began. You see, they're going to put their story, no matter what. We somehow have to begin this is King Tut, the gold man. There's actually a cartoon character, Tut, that white folks have taken and distorted and made it part of the popular culture. We're going to have to challenge that. We may have to bring a lawsuit to say there's a certain integrity. Just as Jewish people and other people, whenever we raise some issue and they don't feel that's correct, there's a lawsuit or some other thing. We have to raise an issue around young people being bombarded with a negative image of King Tut. Some of it, they say, is so vicious. It's on the scale of making Imhotep an evil figure. Yes. So there's certain things that are sacred that you can't do this. So there should be a lawsuit or something brought on the mummy return process. Yes. So until we can make it part of the culture like that, we're going to be in trouble. And of course, we could put it and should put it in games and other things that affect our young people, and in the videotapes. I had a couple of this Koch tapes, and I think I got a sister got one, she couldn't believe it. The sister that brought me to say, you were actually in his office, laying it out with him. Yes. So we're going to try to get the publication that will include Dr. Jeffries and the African Education of Ed Koch, May the 16th, 1990. This is a year or so before the opening speech. We took the books down, laid it out, and the fool is stuttering and stammering. Because the first thing I did was, I saw a little Statue of Liberty on his desk. And I said, Mayor Koch, before we deal with anything, we're going to have to deal with that Statue of Liberty. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, the Statue of Liberty has not a damn thing to do with your immigrant forebears. It has to do with mine that fought for liberty in America.
That's right.
Then he said, what have I got here? So he left the office and brought in his legal partner, Dan Wolf, to sit in on it. And then I was with my brother. So it was 2 and 2. 2 boys from Newark and Mayor Koch from Newark. You know, he used to grow up, he grew up around Bloom Street, Prince Street, and that area. Yeah, Mayor Koch. But he's the one that taped it. He put 2 tape recorders down. He said, one is for you, one is for me. He's since denied that this tape exists.
Well, it's not his voice in it.
It has his voice in it. He knows I was there, but they will deny it. Just as the conference we had at City College, where we were dealing with early civilization because one of our students went in and challenged the professor, ran the professor out. So they had stopped the regular college and we planned this conference and we had it that came up to the Great Hall, thousands of students. And all of the scholars that they brought from around the world, I said, I just went the up couldn't come, this is 1980. But I said, don't worry about it, Sango won't let the up out, but we got Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, myself, Dr. Van Servan, so we carried the ball. They had scholars from around the world, but all of the scholars agreed to the African origin of Nile Valley civilization. They was fit to be tied. They tried to get Bruce Williams to lie about his Nubian finds. He said, I can't do that. Sure, he couldn't do it because he had sent us a copy of it. I had made 5,000 copies. Africa, the mother of civilization, multimedia encyclopedia of ancient Africa, with this little, a cartoon figure. And this is Dr. Ben going around the temples of the Nile like he owns them. But see, this should have been made for mass distribution, but with the fellow getting hurt or whatnot, I don't hear nothing about this at all. But this is something that we should figure out how to take this and then have millions of them made, so that we put the work in the hands of our people.
And that is in African Culture and Business from the British magazine. It's in the African Culture and Business coming out of London.
Right, but are they really promoting it? And how come they're not promoting it here? And how come I don't have a copy? I just have this copy that I float around with.
Okay, I'm going to look at the next week so people can order.
Yeah, because I've written in that magazine, Rosin. They had something on Rosin in the magazine before, but this is extraordinary. And of course, Gil was able to go to the Nile when I forced him to it. We got a ticket from him in '87, and he was able to put our traveling, the 1,000 people who went to the Nile on the airways. But can you imagine? We produced this enormous phenomenon of 1,000 people going to the Nile. I had 3 generations. My mother went, my brother's kids. I had 22 people go, including my godkids, etc. And there's nothing serious written about that. Just the impact of the 1,000 people and where they went and what they're doing It's an extraordinary story. I was reading Star Legend 2 days ago, and I'm flipping through, and here's some woman who went to somewhere for 2 years, 20 years, was an anthropologist. She graduated from Wheatwick High School in 1958, and she decided she wondered what happened to the people that she graduated with. So she wrote a book on the 400 people that she graduated with. She contacted 350 of them, got all their information and what they're doing. They got a book about this graduate class in Wheatwick. Can you imagine if we could do something about what happened to transform the lives of these people who went to the Nile? And so we do a lot of these things, and we don't maximize the utilization of them to make them work. And so we've got to do that. We've got to put this book in the schools and the churches and in people's homes. You see? Well, I was just saying that I wanted to order 30 copies for my class. Rouse wanted to order 30 for hers. Her boy told me on the platform yesterday that he wanted to put it in his class, and they're telling us the books are not available. They won't be available until September 30th. So is some games being played now? Because this is not the material in this. They can't accept. This is the subtitle is A Journey of Liberation. If we can see our history as a journey of liberation, as opposed to it being episodes in relationship to white folks, then we have transformed the history. That's the power that Reagan talked about, the ability to define reality and have other people respond to your definition as if it were their own. Because even yesterday, I knew I was running over my time, but I wanted to make sure that people knew that the Statue of Liberty had nothing to do with immigrants. And if there's a real spirit of the Statue of Liberty, it's Harriet Tubman. I didn't get a chance to get that out. That was in my notes, but I didn't get that out. But the Frenchmen who conceived of the Statue of Liberty, the Frenchmen who put together the design of it, they knew that the spirit of the Statue of Liberty was the life and struggles of a Harriet Tubman. Nothing to do with immigrants. But that story still is not told. Yes. And until we can get these stories out to the masses of our people, we'll still be boxed in and having it at African Echoes in the first world and at the City College, but not out into the general culture. The key is making it part of general culture. But it's happening more than we realize, but it has to happen even more. We have to make it up. In other words, the war against us is real, and the strategy that they have are real. And so unless you're dealing with a system, and unless you have a system to deal with a system, you won't have impact. So Pan-Africanism is the African system of power for me. And it has to become inclusive of everything, how we live, how we think, what we eat, how we raise our children, how we marry. And so we have to institutionalize it and make it a way of life. I said black power is not just power words, it's a way of life. And you have to think constantly of empowering yourself.
Okay. Other question? Come on, Tom.
Okay, Brother Jeffries. I want to thank you for your presentation this evening. Greetings, Brother Jeffries.
Yes.
Your presentation was very insightful this evening. I commend you for it. Wondering if you could touch on something you raised earlier in terms about the role of youth in our liberation struggle. And if you look at our history, it seems that throughout our history, not only just in the U.S., but also in other parts of the diaspora, the youth played a key role as parts in our struggle. A lot of the rebellions that took place on the various plantations, what have you, were initiated or led, by the youth. For example, I think Nat Turner was in his late 20s, early 30s when he led his revolt, for example. And also, and even going to more recent times, Martin Luther King, I think, was a recent doctoral graduate when he sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. So there's a whole history of that, and I don't think it's commonly understood, in terms of how the youth tend to bear the brunt of our oppression. I was wondering if you could deal with that.
I don't think you meant what you said at the end, that youth bear the brunt of our oppression.
No.
You didn't think that one through. All of us bear the brunt of our oppression, including our babies. But what we forget is that the youth are on the cutting edge of our struggle and our liberation, which is the way it should be. Because as African socialization is understood, the first 5 years or so, you're near your mama and the home, and you're getting your grounding. And then as you get older, you go into your young man's training, etc. Then when you get to that manhood age, they celebrate it by your ceremonies, your rituals. So when you're 12 or 13 or 14, you're already coming into some consciousness. Then you got to sit at the feet of the masters while you learn in your adolescence to become a young man, ready to do for your people, to protect your people. So it's in the African tradition that teen age is an important age in which young people have roles to defend and to struggle for their people. Our problem is we don't have African values. We don't have African understanding. That we have bought into what I call the extended adolescence of the black man. People like myself, who grew up playing baseball and basketball, and I call myself Dr. J, grinning and smiling, and letting folks know that I could kick butt up until a few years ago on the basketball court with these young kids. We have an extended adolescence period. Ain't no old man, 60 years old, need to be worried about some basketball. But when I was 40, I was going to say, I'm going to be the person still playing basketball at 65. With all the problems in the world that I know about and have been in the middle of, why would I even entertain that thought? And if it affects me, I know it's affecting everybody. People want to be baseball players. Now, basketball players. Now they've got this thing about everybody being a hip-hop. I mean, I said, I couldn't believe it. This black man standing in front of me on the subway, and he got it. And then at the march the other day, here's another man, a little one. I mean, where did we get this? Somebody has said, this is the confusion we're going to put in their community so that we mess with their socialization process. But in point of fact, when Sinke revolted on the Amistad, it was no folks, it was young folks. And they did have at least a little bit of that in the movie Amistad. But of course, they built it around John Quincy Adams, former president of the United States, fighting for black people. He never met Sinke. They had this relationship where they're talking, looking at plants and carrying on. No, he didn't. He was doing his legal thing. But the Africans had done the real thing. They had revolted the young people. So that's an example of what you're talking about. As I was saying, all of these movements, sit-in movements and whatnot, come from the burst of energy of the youth. And that's the way it should be. I ended speaking yesterday with South Africa. And I didn't want to bring Nelson Mandela down, but I had to take him down a peg and say that the struggle in South Africa was not Nelson Mandela. He symbolized the struggle. And I'm saying that when black people get power, it's no guarantee that that power is going to serve the people. And Mbeki may be a good man, but he's not going to take land from the Europeans and give it to Africans. He's not going to make corporations stop exploiting Africans. He's presiding over the exploitation. So I said, but there was a victory in South Africa, and that victory belongs to the young people. And it's when I was working with the World Council of Churches and the Council Program Against Racism, that's when I discovered how significant was the Black Consciousness movement of Steve Biko, which was inspired by our movement in America. Black Panthers and all those others in America helped inspire the youngsters in South Africa, so they created the Black Consciousness movement. And I ended it by saying that one of the great words of power he left us was, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And he gave his life in that struggle. But children, babies gave their life in that struggle. It's their blood that galvanized people in South Africa to move. Not Nelson Mandela's politics or ANC's tactical bombing of trying to blow up places and not kill anybody, not shed any blood. When black children, young people's blood was shed, then that struggle reached its height. And that's when the women said, we have to go with the children. We have to stand by our babies. And once the white man realized that the women and the children was not going to buy into the okie doke, he knew the ball game was over. He readjusted his system. He went to plan B or C, and that was to bring out Nelson Mandela to manage the plantation. So that the liberation, which was almost at hand, when people said we're not going to accept the brainwashing and the mental slavery, that's when white folks went back to the drawing board and brought Nelson out. But so I wanted people to remember the Steve Biko, Malcolm X of his time, and the blood that he and others shed in his struggle. But again, it was young people, young people articulating, young people writing newspapers, newsletters, young people organizing, agitate, educate, organize. That was Kwame Ture's thing. And again, young people. He was targeting. He didn't want to get all black people. He said, let me target the young people so that they can make an important move. So I support what you said. I know that's the case in other countries, including the Caribbean. The movement we had in the 60s was reflected in the Caribbean also. And a number of the people made moves in Caribbean. And they got squashed. They got crushed by their own people. Dr. Clark and I went to Jamaica, 72. We couldn't bring in Marcus Garvey's books. We had a stink in his books. Trinidad and Tobago. Eric Williams wrote monumental works, Capitalism and Slavery, and From Columbus to Castro, and whatnot. He didn't want his own works to get into the hands of his people, because then they would be looking at the system of European oppression and system of European exploitation. They'd be raising the question of how can we fit comfortably with this? Now, he was trying to run a state, so he wanted to get whatever little crumbs he could squeeze out of England to run a state. He didn't want his people to have no revolutionary fervor. Yeah, and so we got to understand that youth is key, but not youth for youth's sake, but part of a revolutionary continuum that involves us all. They need the wisdom and experience of the elders, and they need to know why they're fighting to protect the babies and the women, and not just to get in this self-consumption that we now have. No, that's something ain't hooked up with that, And looking at all these men that ain't whole, and this culture is not leading them to wholeness. These is part men. These people can't see the whole picture. These youngsters.
Well, the Army came out this week with an SUV for rappers.
What?
Recruiting young black. In the Navy, it went up 10%. In the Army, went down 27% of black in the Navy. In the Air Force, it went down 5% in terms of blacks in the military.
Yeah.
So now they came out. The Air Force came out with the SUV for rappers, and it's going around different cities with the rap songs and the big 15-inch rim.
To try to pull people in.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're trying to get the youth to join the Army instead of.
Well, we're on a victorious path, but you can bet that they're going to try to do everything they can to throw us into confusion. Yeah. We have my brother here from WBA. He has this program in the wee hours of the wee hours of the night. And he works in the wilderness of Patterson. And I used to think that Patterson at Newark was in difficult situation, but after I saw Trenton, I readjusted my situation.
Okay, so what is the situation So what is the situation over there with the skulls that they found, the bones? What they found in Patterson? Is Patterson or one of the town? Patterson.
Are you talking about the cemetery?
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't been in Patterson for like the last
couple of months up in, we're doing some work in Jersey City, cultivating there. But one of the things that I understood is that we have to connect the dots and erase some borders. And it's a difficult proposition when you realize sometimes the limitation of resource and understanding and assistance and all of that. So what you wind up doing, you do as much as you can where you can. This sister right here, this is my queen, who also is from Jersey City. And the interesting thing is that, you know, she had my ear and my attention to say, you know, we need to do some things down here really seriously. And that becomes serious because the good thing for me is I have a partner that I can work with. But the reality of the matter is there's so much work that there has to be this multiple recruitment of talent. And there has to be some bigger visions, I mean, from the grassroots up, not just this situation where you have some so-called, the higher 10% that are articulating to the masses, well, we need to do this. This has to be a communal maximizing effort. You know, every time I come here, I tell you what I've done lately, but one of the things that I did do was I opened the office that I was talking about in Patterson.
Oh, okay.
And I'm in the Masonic Temple now, right? And I opened the office.
Not the big one.
Yeah.
The big one.
No, not the big one, that's up on Broad. This
Yeah.
one down by White Castle,
Okay.
right? And I did open that office, and we're preparing it because my TV show is getting ready to go statewide, you know? And the whole idea of us having our own media arm to be able to do certain things is something that I've been nurturing. But every individual has to choose their talents and their arena of expertise, and then they have to focus on that and then diplomatically marry that in with other people's stuff within the construct of the struggle. So as a consequence, I see Dr. J every place, we see different people, but we've got to add continuity and consistency. So that's what I'm trying to do through the radio show and the TV show.
Yeah, I wanted to, you had a question, but, you know,
That was when you was discussing this about
an example of.
Jamaica. Okay, when you were discussing this thing with Jamaica, you were saying how certain books were banned in Jamaica.
Yes.
I was saying, I remember when books with the autobiography of Malcolm X was banned there too. And even Muhammad Ali was heavyweight champion. He was banned in Jamaica. A lot of people don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Under the government of Embassy Ackley's party. But when Muhammad Ali did finally came down and that government was out of power, under Michael Mann, they had a potential to apologize to him.
Yeah.
For that. But there's a lot of reactionary stuff going on in the Caribbean at that time.
And Walter Rodney suffered greatly because of what he represented in
the Caribbean.
and then we had to try to find safe haven for him in the United States.
Yeah.
We'd have him bring him to our programs and give him visiting professorship and things like that. And when we went to Brazil in '92, I think that's when the Malcolm X film came out.
Yes.
And they banned it in Brazil. They didn't want the people in Brazil, the black people in Brazil, to get no revolutionary ideas. So Malcolm X is, Benedita de Souza, the black woman who's running for the mayor of Brazil, they beat her back with a racist campaign. She stayed the course and she's now the governor of Rio province.
Yes.
Benedita de Souza had asked us to see what could be done to try to get the Malcolm X film down to Brazil. So these people are about controlling the images.
You know, I think they finally did get down there. A friend of mine taught school in Brazil. He taught me articles back.
Mm-hmm.
But they were very favorable reviews. People like the film, but the fact that the top would be, like you were saying, did not want it.
Right, yeah. And we have to realize that we're up against a number of interests that don't want it. The Anglo-Saxon power does not want us dealing with them being at the top of the heap. They're partners in struggle and oppression. Jewish folks don't want us breaking from under the control they think they have on us. And then we have Negroes who bought into being the surrogate managers of black folk for white people. And then we even have an institutionalized process of organizations such as the Boule, the Sigma Pi Phi, which has many positive things. Ace is a part of it. Bernie Coleman is a part of it. But what role do they play in suppressing this African emergence? And that's the big thing. That Samuel Proctor was from Jersey and his base was here. Proctor was a major player in the Boule suppressing Africa. And I don't know whether when he was in Nigeria as the Peace Corps director for those 3 or 4 years, whether some traumas or something happened to him that he just could not accept Africa in this growing consciousness that we have perceived it. But so we have to understand that it's not just one person or one group or individual. There's a whole array of opposition up against us.
You mentioned, you raised the issue of the Boule, and I'm sure that there are many, many people who don't have any understanding of what that is. Could you just give a quick overview of what the Boule actually is and its origin?
Yeah, quickly.
You have one? You can use this presentation for now.
Oh, is that right?
No?
Oh, okay, I'll take it to school. I'll read my classroom tomorrow. Now, that's a lecture that I'll come back and give in its fullness, because it wouldn't be fair to deal with it in this quick minutes. Number one, the concept of brotherhood and sisterhood is at the core of the African value system. And wherever Africans have moved to high culture, that brotherhood and sisterhood has become a spiritual force within that culture. And the way they've been able to keep us down, confused and oppressed, is to destroy the concept of brotherhood and sisterhood. And that exists today. Their greatest fear is that we understand what these symbols mean now, and we're going to call for brotherhoods and sisterhoods in the African tradition. So whenever the European has fought his great wars and movements, he's run into opposition of people who have brotherhoods and sisterhoods. The Crusades can be studied in terms of trying to retake Jerusalem. I'd rather study it in terms of the Muslim brotherhoods, which were formed when they got in contact with the Nile. And they found that the secret to Nile culture were these brotherhoods and sisterhoods. The Muslims just took the brotherhood portion. And they created these brotherhoods that allowed them to fight the European and defeat them. So when the European coming in contact with the Muslim brotherhoods, he made his adjustment. So he started forming his brotherhoods, the Knights of Malta, and all, the Knights Templars, and all these other organizations. They're at the core of their tradition. The Catholic Church has a brotherhood, a Jesuit brotherhood, that is not the regular Catholic Church. They have regular teaching processes. Curtis Sliwa is the Jesuit process. And Curtis Sliwa is almost like a pit bull going after us because he knows. Amos Wilson is amazed because he came up in the miseducation of Mississippi. He was able to deal with that. He went through the misprocessing of Morehouse, the Negroness of Morehouse. And then he went to the Jesuit process in St. John's or the Catholic Forum, wherever he got his PhD. He survived that and was moving toward institutionalizing the African brotherhood tradition. He was growing every day in this way. And so we have to understand that at the core of high culture and civilization is the concept of brotherhood, sisterhood, where people are accountable to each other and accountable to higher traditions. We've lost that. These people are making all this money like the Russell Simmons and the P. Diddy's and have no accountability to nobody. They think they formed a brotherhood and sisterhood, but I understand that some of them have set it up where if you're not ready for a gay experience, you ain't gonna be a part of their group. This is getting serious now. Okay? That they have said, some of those people that you are jumping up about and all excited about, have created within their messed up cultural formation rites of passage that are a disgrace. And so we need to understand that this is the cultural war that we're up against. Now the Boule comes at the turn of the century when black people have been so suppressed in the 1900s that the little progress we made in Reconstruction had been pushed back. There was a conflict as how we're going to deal with white folks. Booker T. Washington made the Atlanta speech, 1896, or 1895. 1895. We can be as one as the fist in certain things and as separate as the fingers in others. In other words, he said, we don't want your women, we don't want to sleep around you, we don't want to go to your opera houses, but we want to be able to have an economic and political control over our communities. Booker T didn't say let white folks control our communities. He said put your buckets down where you are, control your education institution, learn to build your own housing. That was something we needed to do. We can't dismiss him. That we need to do now. W.E.B. Du Bois, being an elitist, born an elitist, wanted to identify with the people. Never fully did. Du Bois died an elitist. So he was able to make his contribution by coming up with the talented 10. And so he said the talented 10 needed to be conscious. It needed to be committed. When he became more and more progressive, and eventually he said he was a communist, he wanted that talented 10 to be the revolutionary vanguard. So we need to look at the voice in a different context. But that was the struggle going on. And Du Bois and others, including those who were setting up Morehouse and Atlanta University, they took the Boule, which was created up at Cornell with a few brothers, and they expanded it to become the leadership arm of Black America as a secret society. That was not the Masons, which has its roots going back to Prince Hall, was not the Brotherhood of the Church leadership, but this was something of the new professional class that was going to emerge. And so that's what the Boule is. They came at the same time to produce the black fraternities and sororities, and Charles Wellesley, Dr. Charles Wellesley, has written a book called The First 50 Years of the Boule. And in it he has those leaders that were there. Du Bois was one of the early ones. John Hope, whose grandson I went to school with, president of Atlanta University and Morehouse, he was one of them. And so this was the light and bright bourgeoisie that became a part of it. And Martin Luther King, he ends with Martin Luther King, who was one of it. So much of the key leadership of Black America is in this society of secrets where they work out their plans and set their priorities. And my objection is that Africa and African peoples is not at the heart of it.
Dr. J, one of the reasons I wanted to raise that, and you're right, we don't have enough time to do it, but I wanted to tap the origin because I once heard this analogy given about being on the football field, and when the ball is hiked, the quarterback is here, but somebody runs on the field and says, no, he's over there, and they got you chasing going in the wrong direction. The relationship of the Boule and its formation to the secret society organization of Skull and Bones, and that has to be a key part of it because many times, in fact, in Skull and Bones, they use the symbol of the Grecian Sphinx, right? And we know that a Sphinx guards something greater than itself. And unfortunately, right there we can put the microscope on where those who are in leadership positions for us will absorb all that we are bringing and then turn it over to somebody else, put it at the foot of someone else. And sometimes we need to be able to put the microscope there and see who that is and what the process is, right?
Right. And I think if we understand the processes involved, we'll know that all of the institutions of power have been utilized that way. So not just the Boule, but the church has been utilized that way. Educational system has been used that way. The older societies, such as the Masons and others, have been utilized that way. In other words, we haven't been able to use them as centers of African empowerment because they are used to find a comfort zone within the system of white supremacy. Instead of building an African system, which we have to do. And you can't say that we don't have the wherewithal. You have a whole continent, the richest of the world, but we got to retrieve it. You have Africans dispersed everywhere in key positions. You can't have a Brazil without Africa. You can't have a Caribbean without Africa. Those important nations in South America, Suriname and all those places where their wealth is, you can't have it without Africa. You can't even have a Panama without Africa, but the Panamanians don't know they're African. And certainly we're key to America. We're not invisible in America, but we're not empowering ourselves together. And that's their greatest fear. If we could find a cultural dynamic to empower ourselves together, we would be the greatest force on the planet. Jews are powerful, but they got some sand over there that they call the Holy Land. We got the Holy Continent, the continent of the universe that we're in. And then we have a tradition that we are the first of the human family, so we're the chosen. And then we have our moral and ethical traditions that we don't know anything about, that you live by a standard not of greed or a standard of materialism, but you live by a spiritual standard. That was what African culture was all about. And wherever it propped itself up and moved to a higher level, that's what it maintained. But we're not allowed. We're allowed to see the chaos in Africa. And much of that is manufactured and created. The European walks through the chaos to get the wealth.
It certainly is.
And the chaos turns us off. And I'm going to end this with this. This is Brother Sam. Clemson Brown has good instincts, and he got Brother Sam to take the image of the Million Man March and to make it part of our struggle and victory. And so Brother Sam started putting in figures. So Clemson got excited. And if you can see, if you look through this, he done got everybody in there. He done got Harriet Tubman in there. Harriet Tubman's in there. So you got women in the Million Man March. He put in Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, who opposed the march. I said, stick their butts in there, because it's their work that got us conscious to come together. He got me in there, in Egyptian, in the Kemetic dresses. So he got Paul Robeson in the clouds looking at me. And I could identify with this because while I was standing on that platform for 8 hours, I was seeing Harriet Tubman and Akhenaten and Paul Robeson and Malcolm and everybody at the march. I wasn't hallucinating. I was clear as I could be, but I could see and I could experience them. And the symbol of our resurrection and transformation was right before us. And the minister Farrakhan, I think because of restraints in the Judeo-Christian Islamic worldview, was not able to take that symbol of our empowerment and our resurrection and give it to us. He started playing games with numbers. He started confusing. The only number he needed to raise was the number 14. That in the African tradition and society, secret society, and the Kemetic society, 14, that double 7 was the number of the rise to godliness. And that this nation knew that. So we were standing before the symbol of the 14. When the nation was founded, it was founded on the wrong number. 13 colonies. 13 was not the right number. In the African tradition, the women, Aset, Isis, and Nephthys, her sister, went throughout the Nile Valley to resurrect Osiris, Asar, who had been cut up into 14 pieces. And they found the 13, but the parable says that they could not find the 14. But the interesting thing was to accept the challenge of the dead God figure. They formed a sisterhood of resurrection and spiritual rebirth. Putting the center where it is, the center of life is the female principle. And the African story puts it at the center. The European dislocation of this enormous truth and the laws of nature puts the man at the center without a woman. And so we've inherited that to the Greeks, to the early Hebrews, to the Catholic Church, to the English Germans, to the Romans, the Germans, down through Princeton and Harvard and Oxford and all of that. That tradition of the male and the negation of the female is what we've inherited as power. It is not real power. If we can move into our center, which sees the complementarity of the male and female and the centrality of the female, because the female brings forth God with her womb. Then we have a new paradigm on which to structure our life, and that's their great fear. That this is where these people are going. That's why they're blocking us. Everything we do, they try to block us. There's no reason for this except they know if we moved into our center and reconstructed our life around it, our children would not be the same. Do you see that little girl that spoke yesterday this high in 3 languages? Can you imagine what's waiting for her in the school system? If she comes in there with that persona that she had, she's got to be devastated, okay, in order for her to be dysfunctional in this society. And that's what they profit on: dysfunctional African leaders, dysfunctional African people, dysfunctional African institutions that are serving them. And the Boulé's Sigma Pi Phi's statement is service to the king. Now the king is European. When I was in the Jewish fraternity, I was the Rex, the king. My number 2, the vice president, was the Archon. In the Boulé, the highest level is the Grand Archon, sire, not the Rex, not the king. So the relationship between the European societies and the African society that came out of the Boulé is a questionable one. What is all of that? And we may never know. But if you see some great leaders not doing what they should do, then you know they're restrained by the relationship.
That mosquito before it gets
They're restrained by the relationship with the Boulé. So we can get into this. We don't need to tonight. I got to go catch up with my cousin Norman. So we want to thank you and understand that this is the victory. The African people are on the rise. That 50-year turning point of history from 1945 to 1995. The seeds of African greatness have been planted. They need to be nurtured. And the victory is at hand. Thank you all.
All right, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. We have copies of this one. Two copies. Here. Next week, please come out and support the brother. I was giving you this one, I finished reading it.
Yeah, and this, I brought brothers and sisters, it's getting